decided not the full amount that we've got budgeted in our LTP. I kind of pulled that back a bit. The 1/3.
But if just the wastewater and drain wires would be a great help.
Yeah. Well, your agendas take a little while to come through, but it will come session.
We could handle the rest.
Yeah. Well, that'll just give.
I don't know about the pool though.
Yeah.
And you know, I thought last discussed it was a bit harsh because council has never shirked the obligation towards maintenance. Not in my time here. Whether it was big money or just we've done all the work here.
Well, I don't really think that the choice really is that we're either maintaining it or we maintain it until there's grant funding to do it. That's our only viable option.
Morning.
Well, be great to pay a fund until we $1 million.
I'm just testing the volume. Can you hear me?
That one or that one. That's
Oh,
not,
only
or that one.
only.
God, by Bill, look at you. You'll be running the place soon.
He is set to take over.
I decree the oldest always rules. You know, in marriage, the bloody pakeke has the final say, don't you?
Aye. Kia ora. Morena.
Yeah. Morning.
Morning.
I'm still in my pajamas, so yeah. Good morning, all.
Morning, Sandra.
Morena, Sandra.
Interesting coming down this morning. Never seen so much traffic on the road.
Oh, really?
Right.
Lobby traffic, that is.
Yeah.
And lots of new and strange trucks.
Are they just logging trucks, Bill, or new
Just
and
logging
strange?
trucks here, you know. Not too many metal trucks this morning.
No human trafficking.
I know. No, but I would have thought this was the right time to try and fix the P problem.
Aye.
Lots of movement at night. Lots of movement.
Yes, no, last night I got to listen to the boat being loaded. Heard the logs being put on the boat.
Okay, we'll give it a few more minutes, about 5 minutes. Grab your coffees, your water. Heather, can you please assist Larry? He is looking for the link for the Zoom meeting. Who is the person whose name is Drew?
Hi, from CPS. I'm just going to be helping out with the wastewater treatment plant. How are you?
Thank you, Drew. So just want to let you know we are live, so everything is recorded as we go now. We'll give it a few more minutes. We've got about 3 minutes left. Morning, Pat.
Good morning.
So we'll wait for the rest of our colleagues to come online. And just mute your microphones if you're not speaking. I'll mute mine for now as well.
Good morning, Bill.
Morning. Morning, Pat.
Hi.
Hey again, Bill. Hey, Pat.
Sorry?
How's it
I
going?
nearly came to join you, Bill. I thought you'd be a bit lonely by yourself and that maybe I should come and join you.
No, I'm right.
Don't you feel like a school kid being told what to do at the last minute?
No.
Yes.
You are there. I can't be. It's ridiculous. I'm over this. I'm so over it.
Kia ora tātou. This is James. If people can hear me, this is currently being live streamed. Just a note for people. Thank you.
Kia ora, James.
Yeah.
I think that it's important for us to lead by example as councillors and follow the letter of the rules that are out there. So unfortunately, I know that we really wanted to meet face to face, but unfortunately, it's not the way to go. It's just currently. Probably will be soon though.
Hi, James.
Yeah,
I'm just checking all my participants because I just want to know who's who. Why do you have two links, James?
I'm not sure. Let me sort that out.
That one is you to second to the top, and then you part two. Anyway, we're nearly there.
I've always wanted to clone myself. It looks like I've achieved that.
I can see that. Well, it is gone 9 o'clock, and this is an official council meeting. So,
Madam Chair, who is Drew? Because they are not identified.
I have identified them earlier. This is the gentleman from Becca who will assist us with our wastewater paper.
Thank you.
Okay, well, councillors, welcome to our Zoom council meeting here today. Like you, I'm disappointed that we can't meet face to face today. This is my first day back in my office, but hopefully we will get the proper sign-off from our organisations who give us advice, that is LGNZ and the other name I can't remember now.
Welcome.
Yep, Sorghum. So thank you so much for bearing with us. This is not ideal, but this will have to do for today. So I'm going to ask Josh just to open our meeting with a karakia, and then we will carry on.
Sure. Kia ora mai tātou. Me anoi tātou. E o ngā mano, tēnei te whakamui matatu ki a koe mo tēnei huihui ngā mātou. Arahina mai ki au, ki te tika, ki te puni a mātou. Tuku o mai tō wairua tapu hei manaaki, hei awhi, he te ake o ki a mātou. Tukuna mai hoki tō wairua tapu I runga I te whānau Maxwell, I raro I tēnei wā pauri, mō rātou, mō tātou, te iwi Māori, haere atu rā, Uncle Henry ki te pō uriuri, ki te pō tangotango. Tukuna mai tō manaaki, I runga I te whānau Maxwell, I runga I ngā whānau pani, I runga I ngā rawakore, I ngā pani, I roto I tā rātou pauritanga I tēnei rā, korore ki tō ingoa tapu, āmini.
Thank you for that, Josh. Welcome, everyone. Big day today. We are back in level 2. Things are starting to heat up, and as a council, it is good that we have our first council meeting in level 2 today. We've got important stuff that we're going to work through today, so I ask that you bear with us. It is not ideal meeting like this, but we have done it before and we do it quite well. So let's get cracking. I'm looking for apologies at this stage. No apologies. Thank you for that. Any declarations of interest? None of that. We then move to our minutes. As you can see, we have got quite a set of minutes. There's the confirmation of the non-confidential minutes, 27th of Feb, the Extraordinary Council, 30th of Jan, Extraordinary Council, 18th of March, the one on the 24th of March. If you are happy, we can move them as one, but I can also take them individually if there is a councillor that would like us to take them individually. No?
I'll move they be approved in block.
Can I ask if, Bill, was it you speaking?
Yep.
Okay, so we've got a mover and Bill. Do I have a seconder for our batch of minutes? I've got Shannon. All in favour?
Aye.
Contrary, carried. So just for practical reasons, can I ask today, if you move or second something, please put your hand up. If you want to ask a question, please use the little blue hand. Because it makes it easier for me just to visually see what goes on in front of me. So are there any questions around the minutes? Pat.
Sorry, at the minute, because I'm on a new screen, I can't find the blue hand. I just want to ask a question in matters arising around the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of February.
What page, Pat?
It's item 10.1 on page 7. And it's funding for up to 200k for a boat for the harbour master. We were still to see a report on the budget operational costs for that initiative, and I wanted to know an update on what, if anything, has been done about it, because there was someone who sent in an offer of a ex-fishing boat that could be modified relatively cheaply, and we understood. So
thank you. Thank you for that, Pat. Can staff please?
Good morning. When we talk this way, we'll just raise our hands, okay, because we can't use a computer screen to put in chat. So through your worship, Sunny had looked at that and it wasn't suitable for the purposes, but then we have since went into lockdown and everything got put on hold. So we'll be re-looking at that and bring that back to council as we had committed to.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors, around our minutes? If not, I'm going to move us to
I have one further question.
Thank you, Pat.
On the matter on the minutes from the meeting of the 18th of March at page 16, paragraph 6. So what consultation has occurred to date? This is around the amendments to the LTP, and we were going to go out to consult, and yet we are going to adopt that LPP on the 25th of June. So what plan does council management have in place to enable the community to have some, give us some feedback on the LTP in the light of COVID-19 and in the light of the fact, I guess, that consultation period has been truncated?
Thank you, Pat.
Through your worship, so I believe you're referring to the annual plan, Councillor Seymour. In
Yes,
which
the annual
case,
plan, I beg your pardon.
Yep, so at that point, that was due to the increase that was proposed. The original, I think it was 4.87.
Correct.
And since you had since made a decision to go back to what is in the long-term plan, which means that there's no substantive increases that have happened. So that therefore consultation wasn't required, but we have put that information out there on our website in terms of engagement and engagement process.
Well, that's not what the minutes say. The minutes at page 16, paragraph 6, actually say that there will be consultation.
Yes, and through your worship, those minutes referred to the previous annual plan rates increase. You had since met and changed that.
On the 18th of March?
I thought we're looking at the March minutes.
Yes, the minutes of the 18th of March when...
Are they?
13th of March.
Yes. Yes, and we met in April.
Correct. So the public is getting very little opportunity to give us any feedback, is essentially. We will adopt that rating increase on the 25th. The one other thing around that, which isn't in the minutes, but we have asked a couple of times for a spreadsheet showing the indicative implications of the rate strike, and it's not really to do with the changes, but we've asked, and again on the last call, it was promised that we would get that indicative spreadsheet that we normally see of townships, urban, rural, commercial. Yes. High value, low value type stuff. That has not been provided yet.
That is forthcoming. So Pauline will be providing that to, is it the Finance Committee meeting, Pauline?
For your worship, we're just doing the final parts of it from the carryovers, and so the modelling is being revised, but as soon as that's done, it will be given to councils, whether it's at that committee or a preliminary information beforehand.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any other questions around our sets of minutes? Shannon. Oh, and I see Meredith's little hand is up as well. Shannon, you go, and then Meredith. Thanks, Meredith.
Thank you. Sorry, I should have used the blue hand. I just wanted to know if we will see minutes from the meeting of the subcommittee that we created with the 3 participants related to the minutes from 14th of May as well, I think it was. Oh no, minutes of these, sorry.
24th of March.
24th of March. So just whether that committee had to meet and whether we will see minutes and details of those meetings.
Yes, is that the emergency committee, Councillor Dowsing? Yes, so we haven't had to meet, so there are no minutes.
Great.
Kia ora, Shannon, that was my question. And just to clarify, Reed, that was the committee I was allaying to in my email when I asked if they had met or were required. So kia ora, thank you for the reply.
Thank you for that. Okay, councillors, we move on to page, it starts at 21, but there's quite a few items on our action sheet. So if you have any issues you want to raise on the action sheet, now is your time. Tony.
I'm sorry, but my docs on tab is just frozen, but I had a question, so I need to reopen it. So maybe if someone else goes first, I'll reopen it. Just flipped it off my screen, I'll reopen it. But I had a question around, and I'm not sure if this extends into these documents yet. It was around page 27, I think, and it was the costings for the alternative use and disposal for the mortuary. There's a spreadsheet there. So that was my question. That was my first question. I'll just get my docs on tab back up. I have to keep jumping between screens.
I think you might be at committee recommendations, Councillor.
Am I too far ahead, am I?
Yep, so we're just at the action sheet now, Tony, page 22, 23, 24, and 25.
Got my docs on tap working again now. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions from councillors in regards to action sheet? If not, I'm going to move on to our first paper. So we are on page 28 of 122, and we are talking about committee recommendations to council. So Councillor Dunn, is she online yet? She is just, oh, there she is. Do you want to have a quick word or just...
I wasn't at that meeting, if you recall.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
So any questions around this paper? So I'll read the recommendations to you. It adopts the recommendation from our Wastewater Management Committee that Council A approves an unbudgeted expenditure for the separation of mortuary wastewater in the 1920 financial year, comprising 45,000 capital and 10,000 operational costs as detailed in attachment 4. B approves a further 195K and 17,500 capital be included in the 2021 annual plan, and any other future funding to be incorporated into the 2021 to 2031 long-term plan prioritization process. So those are the recommendations. Pat.
Thank you very much. When one looks at the breakdown, have I unmuted? Yes. When one looks at the breakdown, which is on page 29, can you, and under capital, could management please explain what integrating Te Aho Māori, etc. is for 20,000, please?
Thank you. Who's going to speak on behalf of staff? David, thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's part of working with our iwi partners to ensure that the way that we are going to be integrating the mortuary waste collection and disposal is okay from a Te Ao Māori perspective. So that's ensuring that tikanga protocols and things are observed and that we're getting their specialist input into what it is that we're going to be doing.
Thank you. That's what I imagined it was. Now, can you explain why that is capitalised, please?
So we're able to capitalise that because the costs go into the design. So part of the expert advice that we're getting from our Kiwa group is informing the design for the way that will actually be built.
And can you tell us how much we've spent already on that level of advice as we've moved towards design?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd have to check with the team and come back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I've got quite a few hands up. I'm going to first ask Debbie, then Shannon, and then Meredith. You go, Debbie.
Kia ora, thank you. I was just looking at that same table on page 29 and just wondering, the Kiwa group funding goes from 15 grand to 35 grand, more than double, from 2019 to 2020. I was just wondering what that was about.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's because we're tasking the Kiwa Group to do more and more work for the Wastewater Management Committee. So the Kiwa Group is something that reports to the Wastewater Management Committee, and the WMC are able to ask the Kiwa Group to undertake works for them on behalf of the resource consent. So they advise the WMC. The cost is reflective of the need that we have for them to give us more input into what we have going on.
Thank you. We move to Shannon and then Meredith.
Thank you. I was just happy to move this paper and appreciate that we're going to be getting on with this work.
I second that, Madam Chair.
Seconded by Bill Burdett. Thank you. Okay, we have Meredith and then Tony.
Kia ora koutou. My query was just, is that budgeted amount currently enough? Are we expecting, as there are lots of infrastructure, changes into that space? So I just was interested to know how the committee came to those amounts based on obviously the intel from the experts, but is it going to be enough? Is it going to grow in its inception? Appreciate the paper and the experts that worked on it, but I was just interested in the costs as they were. Are they going to be enough? Is it a now and then they may grow? That was my query.
Thank you, Meredith. who is going to answer Meredith's query? Dave, thank you.
Mic problem. Chair.
I can't hear you, Dave. You muted.
It's okay, Dave, if you don't want to answer my question, but you know, I thought it was a good one.
Okay.
There we go, Dave. You know.
No, we're going on, and we're cutting in and out.
Cutting in and out. So through you, Madam Chair, the costs have been done. This is a relatively simple exercise from an engineering point of view. We're quite confident that the costs that we have there will be more than enough.
Madam Chair, this is normal practice in today's environment. Tikanga-based recommendations are taken on board by most organisations in the current climate and have been for a while.
Thank you, Bill. We move on to Tony. Tony, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My question was really just for clarification, was the $15,000 that was the Kiwa budget in the bottom table additional to the $20,000 that Pat asked about, which in brackets says including Kiwa Group in the top table?
Thank you, David.
Through you, Madam Chair, these are two different activities. So one is for mortuary waste separation. The other one is for the alternative use and disposal work. So they're two separate projects that we're engaging the Kiwa Group to work with us on.
Got that now, see that. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Any other questions, councillors, on this paper? I do have a mover and Councillor Dowsing and a second and Councillor Burdett. Pat. Councillor Seymour.
Supplementary question, and I totally appreciate the point made by Councillor Burdett and that this expertise needs to be paid for. But if it is determined that further technical expertise beyond what the group feel they have to bring to the table, is that going to be additional expense?
Through you, Madam Chair, we've worked with the Kiwa Group on the scope of what was needed to give the WMC advice. So they have given us a project plan for the work that's going to be done in order to answer the questions that the WMC may identify around tikanga and around how this process will work going forward. So they were part of the scope. So we're confident that the scope should cover all of the things that we need to.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I have no further questions, I'm going to put it to you. I've got a mover and Councillor Dowsing, a seconder and Councillor Burdett. I ask that you please physically put your hands up when you vote so I can see that. All in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, we go to the local governance statement on page 30. That is an extensive document that staff has pulled together, covering everything we do and how we do it in committee structures. So any questions around that paper? Pat?
I'd like to move the paper. It certainly is very comprehensive and it covers, absolutely, as you say, covers everything we do. Good reading for anyone who wants to know what local government in this region is about. And I'm happy to move the recommendations, approve the statement and delegate to the Chief Executive of the authority. Well, we haven't made any amendments.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Okay, we've got some questions on this paper. So I've got a seconder in Meredith, Councillor Akuata Brown, Larry, then Meredith, and then Tony. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to let you know I'm having major problems with the Zoom. I keep on going in and out all the time and cutting in and out. And my docs on tap on my computer is all fuzzy. I can't even read my agenda. It's just come right now, actually. But every page I go to, it's all fuzzy. So yeah, I'm having major problems. So if you don't hear from me very much, it's because my connection, for some reason, is not working very well. Okay, so yeah, I'll probably be in silent because the Zoom thing just keeps on cutting in and out all the time. It's not working like it normally does. I don't know what's going on.
Thank you for letting us know,
Apologies.
Larry. Meredith.
I just was interested to know in respect to our discussion the other day about the vision in regards to this document. just when I looked at it, I just was kind of cognizant of us discussing a new vision of sorts, but I just, yeah, I wasn't sure. And this document is a great document, really informative, well structured, etc. But that was my only question, was in respect to our discussion around vision and where that's at. Kia ora.
Thanks, Meredith. And our vision work will carry on as planned. This is more the structure of how we operate as a council. So I can assure you our vision work will carry on. And Nadine, your hand is up.
Yes, and through your worship, once and if you change that vision, the second recommendation gives me the ability to amend that and update the document without having to come back with it again to council for approval.
Thanks for
Thank
that.
you.
Tony.
Am I live at the moment? I can't quite. Yeah, okay. So I just noticed that it says there's 4 iwi on the visual page, but we in our other report it says there's 6 iwi. So I would have thought there's 6 iwi, not 4 iwi.
Tony, I saw in the other document as well, the 6 iwi. It's another paper, hey, and I was going to ask around that as well. So I don't think it's part of this paper, but in another paper, there's definitely mention of 6 iwi.
Yeah, it's in the Te Whānau Akai
Yes.
paper.
Yes. So we can discuss that when we come to that paper. So councillors, any more questions? I've got Andy Cranston wanting to, Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thanks for that. Not sure how much detail could go into a document like this, but even though our consultations got a lot better over the years, we still get burned sometimes. I mean, thinking about the inner harbour and most recently the cycle walkway going out to the river mouth, where the consultation has been brought back to us saying that it hasn't been appropriate, and it's held those, it's really damaged those projects. So in the document, the as far as consultation goes, the only thing I can see there, and it's in the special consultative procedure, is notified via the newspaper of proposal of consultation being undertaken. I just wonder if we really need to have some sort of paper on what true consultation looks like from the public perspective, so that they are then in a position where they understand that they're in this process. And really it's about getting in the process a lot sooner than they do. We get burnt because people come into the process a lot later, and then we're sort of on the back foot quite a lot. So I just wonder whether there can be any way of identifying what really good consultation is, how we go about it, and certainly notifying via the newspaper. The only thing alluded to in this document as being how we do perform that consultation. I do see as being a little bit inadequate. So it's just about getting a process in place where everyone's on the same pathway with identifying and using good consultation.
Thank you, Andy. Nadine.
Through your worship, so your opportunity to look at our consultation processes through your significance and engagement policy, which comes as part of the long-term plan. So there will be a paper that will come to council reconfirming or adjusting that policy around your level of engagement with the community. Bearing in mind that there are examples where, you know, things may not have been quite right, but that in terms of the sector approach, that council's consultation processes itself have generally been pretty good relative to the rest of New Zealand, as indicated in terms of our last consultation engagement rounds.
Yeah, I do agree. It has been getting better over the years, but you know, it still does come and bite us a bit sometimes. I note with the identification of significance, that is a staff call, and sometimes that gets challenged a little bit by councillors where staff have made the call on the level of significance, and you know, we might debate that sometimes. So I just wondered how that significance is determined too, whether that can be a bit more transparent.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks.
Any more questions around this paper?
Just one, Madam Chair, in terms of Andy's question, and I guess looking at one or two of the frowns on the faces, there's a very good explanation on page 64 Maori and mana whenua engagement and relationships. It goes through the whole gambit of responsibilities council has with Maori and the different levels. The only question I have is how do you differentiate, and this will be a difficult one for Nadine and David, how do you differentiate between hapu and iwi when there are so many different groups out there at present?
Through your worship, so our engagement with hapu and iwi is varied as outlined in terms of our piritahi engagement, and regular meetings with iwi and hapu and marae clusters have assisted council to, I guess, know who to engage with, and we very much take that guidance from our iwi as well. But Keita might be able to also add to that.
Morena, everyone. Councillor Burdett, we take an inclusive approach, so we wouldn't pick to engage just with iwi or just with hapu, so that we cover all bases. There is not a process of exclusion that we're implementing when we engage with iwi. So we're trying to include all and to hear that voice, depending on what the statutory requirement is and the values and effects that we're trying to understand at the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I have no more questions around this paper, I don't see any hands up. I've got a mover in Councillor Seymour and a seconder in Councillor Meredith Akuhata Brown. I put this to our table. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Thank you, everyone. We move to our next paper on page 78, and this is the paper around Gisborne Holdings Limited. Just talking about moving some timeframes for the statement of intent and also extending the directorships to take into account for the 2 months that in effect we lost. So any questions around this paper, page 78?
I'm happy to move.
Moved by Councillor Dowsing.
Happy to second.
Seconded by Councillor Gregory. If there are no more questions, I put the recommendations to you. I'll just read them out. As shareholders of GHL extends the deadline for the board to consider shareholder comments on the draft statement of intent commencing 1 July 2020 by 1 month to be on or before 1 June 2020. As shareholder of GHL extends the deadline for the board to deliver the completed statement of intent, brackets commencing 1 July 2020 by 1 month to be on or before 31 July, extends Ming Lim Pollard and Peter Reeves' directorship tenure until 25 June 2020 to allow time for recruitment of replacement directors. And the last recommendation instructs the CEO to advise GHL Chair of Council's decision 1, 2, 3 above. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Now we move to our wastewater paper. So councillors, today we welcome Gary and Drew and Neville. Thank you for joining us. Morning, Gary. Lovely to see you.
Good morning.
And Drew is here to join us as well. And we have Neville as well. So this is a paper with a lot of information. I'm sure councillors have heaps of questions to ask. So I think what I will do is take this report as read, but then hand over to Neville first. There's Neville. Neville, do you want to give us the long and short of this paper and then introduce your panelists, and then we take it from there for questions with councillors?
Yes, kia ora everyone. Probably I'll just do a quick introduction and hand it to Gary and also Dave Wilson. As you recall, we presented to council a preliminary design. That design also, the question was asked around resilience and foundation. Considerable amount of work has gone, and I can't understate how much work's gone into actually looking at the various options with the idea of reducing cost. There have been a number of questions around from Councillor Shannon Dowson. We appreciate the questions that are posed and the opportunity to respond. The foundation that we have identified as a 3-stage foundation, which Gary will enlighten on, which includes raft, lattice and piles. And because we're working at pace, we made the original assumption that the whole site would have to be lattice. But in reality, we've been able to, because of the type of construction we've done and the layout, we've had to modify that from a full lattice. But Gary will explain that that hasn't compromised the repairability or the like. The other part of the report is actually to bring forward the cost, because at the last meeting, we were unable to identify the full cost of the projects. And there is a clear explanation as to why the original concept design done in 2016 is escalated to quite a large figure. So that detail is also provided within the report. Probably at this stage, if I could hand it over to Gary to do the presentation, that will probably fulfill some other questions that people might have.
Thank you, Neville. Madam Chair, I'm going to try sharing my screen because we have a short presentation which we think is summarising the report, if that's okay with you. So I'm just looking for confirmation that people can see the screen. It's a PowerPoint slide.
It's all good. Thanks, Gary.
So we're just going to give a little bit of background because it's been 2 months, I think, since almost 3 since we last talked to you. So this is not a full, but it's a summary of where we're up to. And so I was just trying to page down. There we go. We're going to talk a little bit about where we came from, then talk about the concept, preliminary and value engineered design. We've actually had 2 goes at reducing both the costs, but also minimizing the footprint of the plant, because the footprint of the plant is all about the extent of the ground improvements, and that's where a large amount of the costs will be hidden, but they're real for sure. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we need from here, from decisions that were asked for council, so that we can proceed with detailed design. So way back in 2016, council, we were asked by council to produce a concept design for what effectively was clarification and UV disinfection. And at that time, this was the old site, if you like. You can see on the screen the large BTF, the circular structure here. And in blue, the dotted blue outline was what we had conceived of as a concept design. This included clarifiers using lamella clarifiers. These are inclined plates rather than big circular tanks. The reason we went for lamellas was because they do have a very small footprint, and we knew even at that time that the footprint of the plant was going to be an important bearing on the cost of the foundations. At that stage, the solids were going to be dewatered using centrifuges or thickened and then dewatered. We've changed the concept a bit of that, and I'll talk very, very quickly about that. Then we had the UV disinfection. So it was a very compact site, managed to fit in on what was then council-owned land, but it was occupied by other buildings. That had a cost estimate was done for that, and the level of confidence in that cost estimate was shown there as between $20 and $30 million. The median price 24.4. So that was the cost. The range went into the LTP. So that was back, as I said, some time ago. Late last year, we were engaged by council to look at taking that forward. So this is the time frame. We started in September, got to February, reported back to you. And since then, we've been doing 2 months of iterations through how can we reduce the cost and also reach the level of resilience that you all asked us to achieve at the last presentation. We want to enter detailed design. It's been a little bit delayed. As you can see, we're intending to start detailed design in March. We've been going a little bit more slowly than that before this meeting, so that we can get your endorsement of the design, but also had an opportunity to reduce the cost. The intent is that the building of the plant will go from January next year and be finished in March. And I'll come back to the program at the end of my presentation. So the preliminary design we were required to shift to the other side of the main entrance road. So you can see, I don't know whether you can see my arrow or not, but this is the new site. So the old site, the concept design was on the other side. You can see was a little bit more compact. This is the site now that we've landed on an area that has been purchased by council, and we've done all the testing of the ground, etc., on that particular site. So this is the diagram we showed you at our last meeting. Just running through here are the clarifiers, the lamellar clarifiers. There's some filters and UV disinfection, and the large building contained ancillary items as well as the screw presses, which would do the dewatering. So the changes that we made were to go for screw presses rather than the centrifuges. Screw presses are a much lower operating cost and are just produced exactly the same result in terms of the solids dewatering, but that was one of the changes. And also we went to filters. So I'll just move through on the next slide. It's in the paper, but the reasons for the difference between the 24.4 and the preliminary design cost, which arrived at 37.5 million. Quite a big increase, and you will definitely need to know why. So if we've got an explanation for that. The range in cost was a little bit tighter. It was 35.5 to 41.6, because as we went through the preliminary design, we were able to tighten that range. I won't go through each of these in detail, but you can see there were quite a few reasons for why the cost has increased from the concept to preliminary. The site change was quite significant. We certainly had to increase the size of the building, and a lot of these were in discussion with operational staff at GDC. We needed to take into account not only the need to produce a particular outcome in terms of clarification and disinfection, but also had to have a facility that the operators understood, but also the facilities they wanted to have in terms of accessibility for vehicles, but people, a safe working environment, etc. The other thing was added in that wasn't in the original design was the tertiary filters. The reason for that was that we took the opportunity to run a pilot trial of the clarification process using the lamellar separators. And we found that there were at times when there was quite a burst of solids came from the BTF, and the clarifiers didn't necessarily reduce those to the levels which would have complied with the consent or with the ability to disinfect. So it's an insurance policy really, because council is about to enter a consent variation process whereby we are offering up a certain degree of consent compliance, quite a tight one, but that's good for the environment. So from the point of view of both solids and disinfection, the tertiary filters were added into the clarifiers to give that level of confidence that council would be in compliance with its own consent. Two other items, septage and recycled water, were also added at the request of council. The septage is separately funded, and so in future estimates we have excluded that, but it will have to be, it is ideally included in the part of the construction. The recycled water will be the first example of council actually using treated effluent for a purpose to displace the use of potable water, and it'll be used for spray systems and clean downs and washing around the plant. And in actual fact, it's got a payback time of about 1 to 2 years. It's very costly to buy water for the plant, somewhere in the order of $250,000 a year. And so this has a very quick payback time and is a great example of AUD, because the effluent will be very good with the filters and the UV. It will be, it won't be drinkable, so I won't be challenged to drink it, but it will be very clear and clean and able to be used around the site. So that's the explanation. About $12.7 million difference between the initial concept design and where we were at in March or in April, once we'd got the level of resilience defined at our last meeting. Following the advice or the conclusion from council, we then took this away and did a value engineering exercise where we looked at how can we reduce the cost of the plant. So some of the things we did was we looked at a much smaller building than we had originally. We only have 2 screw presses rather than the 3 that were in preliminary design. We went to 1 UV channel without compromising the performance of the plant, but looking at the what would actually reduce the cost and the footprint. We looked at 2 filters rather than 3, and we tried to really make the plant much more compact to reduce the extent of the ground improvement. So that had brought the cost down by almost $2 million to 35.3, with a level of certainty of between 30 and just under $40 million. The challenge was then given to us, how can we reduce it even further? So we were on this path of value engineering, and so we went then to a different layout. We really challenged ourselves, working with the operators and with Drew and Neville and the team. And this is the plant that we have at the moment, where we've taken it to still performing exactly to meet consent compliance, but a much smaller footprint for the process plant, which is I'll show you in a minute just where the foundation is, but that's the process, effectively the liquid process plant here. And the solids plant was we removed the building. So these screw presses are now sitting there on a platform. 3 are shown because as part of the procurement exercise, we feel that we can get away with 2 initially, but if we needed to, we would introduce a 3rd one. So we're designing for 3, but we'll only start with 2. We changed the loadout facility to be on the south side of the site, but we've got a much more lightweight plant in this particular area. Removing the building was a significant saving because we have looked at a reduced lattice ground improvement, which is where the cost is. There are millions of dollars in the lattice. And so now we have reduced the cost to 33.5 with a confidence band of plus or minus, which is shown here, 29 million to 41 million. So the estimate we now have is 33.5. Where have the changes been made between the value engineering option 1 and what we call value engineering 2? The first is that the yellow area, which is the lattice underneath the building, and for those of you that remember the lattice, it's a deep, about 7 to 9 meters deep grid underneath the buildings, which is a cement concrete mix. So all of the yellow is that lattice under the primary plant. And the blue area is what we term a raft. It's those less essential items, and it's effectively a compacted hard fill platform. So we'll excavate and then put a raft down underneath those. So that's what was presented. That was the outcome of the 2020 March 2020 council meeting, was to put as much of the construction out on the lattice as possible to give it the greatest resilience and least amount of time for recovery from the design event earthquake. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see what we have done on value engineering 2. So you can see that the process plant, the yellow under the process plant, is all lattice, and that's about 1,260 square meters, significant reduction from 1,650 square meters on the previous value engineering. And underneath the building, because the plant, the screw press, is now on a steel framed platform, a lot more flexibility in the steel. It will be founded on a concrete slab, but if there is an earthquake, then we will be able to jack up, if you like, any settlement underneath that platform. We'll be able to address pretty quickly through jacking the structure. And we have taken the precaution of putting piles under that structure, because to extend the lattice, it was more cost effective to put piles and achieve the same level of resilience than it was to extend the lattice. Lattices are much more amenable to a rectilinear or a rectangular or square type format, because they are a cellular structure. So we have changed the concept for the platform to piles. So significant cost decrease, and if we were to do a full lattice over the whole site, we'd actually be back to where we were with the preliminary design. So we've given you the figure. We've also looked at, in response to Councillor Dowsing's question, we have said, well, what if you put a lattice under the whole site? And it would be 2,150 square meters, which is pretty much back to where we were with preliminary design. So on the next page, we have got a cost summary. and you'll see the column, this is a very coarse breakdown. We have a much more detailed breakdown of the cost estimate, but VE1 was the first value engineering exercise, and you can see the breakdown there, 35.3. The reduced, the VE2, the hybrid cost, if you like, of the lattice foundation and the piles is not quite $2 million less. But if we had put a lattice under the whole VE2 layout, even though we saved the cost of the building, we're pretty much back to where we were with VE1. So our proposition to yourselves is that we believe that VE2 is a good redesign. It has significantly reduced the price from the preliminary design and also from the value engineering design that we first went through. The important stage now, we want to enter a detailed design as soon as we can. We're a month or so behind where we'd like to be, but we have been to the market, and these are 4 pieces of equipment, which I think I mentioned last time we presented, which we do need to enter into contracts with suppliers so that we can get from them exact design information of what they intend, what they will be providing for this plant. At the moment, we have 4 tenders. We have evaluated them. We have 4 recommendations ready to go. 3 of these plant items, the tertiary disc filters, the UV disinfection and sludge screw presses, are all coming from overseas. So there's a lead time of somewhere between 6 to 9 months for these to be manufactured and delivered to Gisborne. But the essential item we need is to enter into contracts with these suppliers so that they will give us the detailed design information. The first stage of those contracts is somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks, where they will be doing the detailed design. Then we will be discussing with them exactly what information we need. So that's the imminent step which is required. It is a significant commitment. The combined value of these pieces of kit is $5.2 million. And there will be a need to place a deposit, if you like, in order for us to access that design information. By buying this equipment or at least placing orders, it is a demonstration to stakeholders that the council is going to proceed with this project, and we do need it from the point of view of design. Last slide. So this is really a summary of where we're at. The equipment award we wish to make in this month, immediately after this meeting, hopefully, because it is one of the recommendations. We'll proceed we'll continue with detailed design. There are some elements of the plant we have been able to proceed with design on, such as the lift pumping or the pump station to pump to the lamellas, but we're a bit stalled on everything else until we get the detail of this, and also the detail of the screw press platform. We intend to go to the market for a contractor expression of interest, so that we will have a short list of contractors that meet a certain set of criteria. We've discussed that with council, the form of criteria. We want to lock in at least 3 contractors who are prepared to tender this works, so that we feel as though there will be quite a busy construction period coming up as in the COVID recovery phase. So we want to make this project as attractive as possible for the right contractors, including making sure that they have a large number of locally based subcontractors as part of their team. So one of the criteria for selecting or shortlisting contractors will be their willingness to employ local subcontractors, local labour, and help the Tairāwhiti economy. In parallel, there will be a consent variation lodged, planned for August, and that will cement in place the consent conditions that we are working to in terms of the equipment. I forgot to mention that the other thing, the reason we've taken some time to get the equipment vendors finalized is that we have extracted from them all sort of back-to-back guarantees, because they flow down through the path that the lamella output is an input to the filters, and the output from the filters is an input to the UV. So we want to make sure that they as a cascading a surety of quality of effluent from each of those pieces of equipment. We hope to go to tender in late October. So October, November, December will be a tendering period and evaluation, and then for mobilisation sometime on site in January. the construction period is of the order of 12 to 15 months. We really do want to get as much of the earthworks done as possible in the summer months. And as you can imagine, the lattice foundation, which is a very deep excavation, will take somewhere in the order of 3 months. So the first 3 months is really all about below ground work. We will be able to come back to council in November or December with a pre-tender or a pre-tender cost estimate and discussion on contingencies. So that's the next stage of commitment, if you like, is when we do the detailed design and have done a pre-tender estimate in towards the end of October or in October. I think I've covered everything, Madam Chair. So I open to the floor to questions. I can go back to any of slides if people want to question them as well.
Thank you, Gary. At this stage, I've got 2 hands up. First in line is Shannon and then Tony. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to go back on a few of the things you talked about in that presentation. Firstly, you talked about the ground movements and that council were instructed to have a majority lattice foundation. Now, to clarify, our instructions were to have a full lattice foundation in the preliminary design. We debated heavily the topic of whether we should have a hybrid design with mixed pile and lattice foundation, and council's determination was to not do that at this stage. So it's interesting to see that you've changed approach and come back to us with a alternative anyway. Also the report that we have in front of us states that it's a full lattice design, but we can understand from your presentation that it's not. The questions I have are around a few of the increases in price. So the change in site has provided a increase in capex of 1.5 million. I'd like to understand that a little bit further. Why one going over one fence instead of another has increased it by 1.5 million. Also considering that council doesn't own this land, which is what you stated, GHL own this land.
Okay.
So I assume that there is an increase in capital cost for renting this land also. So I'd like to know a little bit more why that change in site has had such an impact. Next, on the building to house dewatering equipment, the reasoning given for that being an increase in 1.3 million is because of an increase in size, and yet in the design you've moved the things that were going to be housed in that building to outside and reduced the size of the building. So I don't understand how that $1.3 million justification is still in there when actually we're having a smaller building that doesn't house the equipment. In terms of UV disinfection, we've also changed from dual UV disinfection to a single row of disinfection, you said. But again, the increase in price is because we now need twice as much. So there's quite a lot of contradictory information in that lot. I understand the need for tertiary disc filters. If we can't achieve what we need to achieve with the lamella, then that's just an oversight and initial scoping, I guess, or not understanding the potential of those clarifiers during the peak flow or peak flushing of our of the others. But yeah, and then going into the later pieces, a significant increase to scope. Well, in my opinion, we're still working with the same scope. We've just put tertiary disc filters in place. So the P&G increase relating to a significant increase in scope is, I don't think, the right terminology. But yeah, I'd like your answer on the others around the change of site, the building and the UV.
Certainly. I think if the slide that you're referring to is the difference between the concept to preliminary, that's between the difference between 2016. And so all of those differences there are really between the concept of the 24.4 up to the preliminary. So but dealing with the building has come and gone in size. It had to increase in size initially from the concept design because we changed the type of presses. We also built the loadout inside. So the sludge loadout became a covered loadout as opposed to a non-covered loadout. So that was one of the increases there. So I think really we haven't actually done a change from preliminary to value engineering other than showing you the cost differences. So I'm wondering if that's where your questions arise, is that slide where the tabulated slide was really from 24.4 to the 37. And then the change in road and the change in site meant that all of our pipelines, these are big bore pipelines, they're sort of on the order of 600 to 700, maybe even 800 diameter. So they have to come across the road, whereas beforehand we were much closer to the existing plant, and we're also able to share the roadway. So by bringing it across onto the GHL land, we have actually sort of seen an increase in pipe lengths, and all of these pipe lengths and bypasses have had to change significantly what we had originally conceived.
Yeah. I guess what I'm asking is we've gone from our 24 million preliminary design, as you say, to our current design. The explanation for the cost increases of 13.1 million are related to items that essentially no longer exist in your value added engineered design.
Some of them no longer exist. Yes, they have been taken out.
So I don't understand the purpose of the slide, nor the logic behind it as the for our increase in price. If most of those items no longer actually are relevant to our change in design.
No, well, some of them have been changed from that particular slide. So those were really just going historically, the difference between the concept and preliminary. We've now looked at each one of those items, and some of them have stayed the same and others have actually been reduced. So the tertiary filters, for example, there's been no reduction in the 3.5 million or of that order. So each of those line items has been modified in some respects. The UV we've been able to reduce by going back to a single channel, but others have stayed the same, and there may be a marginal increase. And the P&G you specifically talk about, the contracting market has changed considerably since 2016, and there is a real difference in terms of P&G. It is a lot of our contracts we're seeing now are at least 15% P&G, and some as high as 20%, as contractors have priced in more risk.
Thanks for that, Gary. We will come back later for more questions, but I've got heaps of hands up. I'm just going to read out. At this stage, I've got Councillor Robinson, then Councillor Dunn, then Councillor Cranston, then Councillor Warsnop, then Councillor Farehinga. I see that Councillor Seymour put her hand up, and then Councillor Sheldrake. Just remember, after Josh, it's you, Pat, because I might forget because I'm looking at the little blue hands. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was alarmed when I read this paper. I found there was quite some almost disingenuous comments. The concept design from 2016, which was peer reviewed, you'd have to hope that council could take some, what's the word I'm after, comfort from the fact that that was peer reviewed, that design, and now it's blown out by $13 million, which really is unacceptable. The fact that paragraph 5 of the report, it said further information is now available and has been used to undertake the preliminary design. And some of that new information is things like, well, we're going to have to house the loadout because the scent, the smell of it, the odor, probably won't meet resource consent conditions. Well, that can't have been unknown in 2016. The comment that the lamellas aren't being used anywhere else in New Zealand. So what, in 2016, the proposal to use lamellas alone was just a bit of a gamble, but it passed peer review, and now we have concluded that actually they're not going to be sufficient for purpose, they're not fit for purpose. So we need some more clarification after that with the tertiary, is it the screws? Sorry, I think it's the screw press platform.
Councillor Robinson, can I just quickly interrupt? I think what we need to do is make sure, if you have several questions, just make sure you give them the opportunity maybe to answer first, because otherwise we might have too many to answer. I'm just asking, be specific with your questions, please.
Well, given this is our only opportunity by Zoom to make a huge decision, I really want to express on behalf of my constituents the concerns around this, because this is a significant cost blowout. And this report does not provide enough detail, as Councillor Dowsing has already alluded to really satisfy some of the questions we're going to face in our community. And first off, I really want to understand is, the decisions that were made in 2016 that were peer reviewed seem to have been insufficient for what we're now facing. And I agree with Councillor Dowsing, a lot of these statements on paragraph 9 simply don't seem to make sense. That the concept design use centrifuge, which is significantly high operational maintenance costs, create a lot of noise. Well, again, these things weren't unknown back then. So why weren't they priced inappropriately? Has this design pricing allowed for the cost over lifetime comparisons? There's no information about that, because some of the new kit you're wanting to buy, you've said is cheaper to run, more expensive, but is its lifetime going to be less than what it was replacing? There's no information about that for us to make an informed decision. I'm really, I'll express it, I'm really surprised and disappointed that the lamellar clarifiers have now been decided not to be sufficient or fit for purpose, when clearly that's resulted in a 3.5 million additional cost. And going back to the points that Councillor Dowsing raised in March around the foundation, have you priced up what a higher risk foundation would look like, as opposed to you've explained to us the reduced lattice is going to save us what looks like 1.2 million. Have you done a further price analysis of if we also then chose a higher risk foundation along the lines of what Councillor Dowsing raised at that previous hui, how much more we could save on that front? Those are my questions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Wilson to respond, and then Mr. MacDonald.
Through you, Madam Chair, the preliminary design in 2016 was essentially that. It was a preliminary design with plus or minus costs of up to 30%, as we indicated back in 2016. As Gary's explained, we've found out as we took this through to a more detailed design around the suitability of some of the equipment that was in that preliminary design. When we peer reviewed the design, we sent it off to make sure that the technology that we were doing was going to get the outcomes that we were after, and that it was something that was within the remit of what the outcome that we were trying to get by adding in the tertiary treatments that we were adding into the system that we were proposing to build. So it was very much a preliminary design, and we flagged at the time that we needed to understand how the technology was going to work to ensure that it gave us the outcomes that were required by our resource consent and to meet the expectations of what we were trying to achieve at Bank Street going forward. A number of the things that we've worked through as we've gone into that and done more detailed investigation, like the clarifiers, have chosen a way to reduce the footprint of what we're trying to do, but then also there were issues around costs, and we do have more detailed breakdown as to the operational cost components that sit in the background as to how we got there. But things like the lamellar clarifiers, they're not unsuitable. It's around the settling time as the wastewater comes post the BTF in order for those lamellar clarifiers. So lamellar clarifiers are used around New Zealand in a range of different things. It's around the use of them after post BTF, which is why we undertook the trials that we did between preliminary design and detailed design, so that we had a better understanding of how that technology was going to work as we upgraded it up into a full-scale model that we'd be doing going forward. Gary, I'll let you answer the technical questions if that's all right.
That's fine. I think as we went from the concept to the preliminary, we also evaluated some of the risks around the performance. So some of the things we've now added in is to address specific risks. So one of them was that the previous plant from concept was much more removed from from sensitive boundaries. We've now, because we've come across the fence, if you like, we now had a much closer to a resident or residences. So it was decided to enclose the building and put more stress on odor. So that was one of the comments, I think, was did we know about the odor? Yes, we did, but we wanted to make sure that when the plant moved, we wouldn't infringe the designation conditions. The lamellas, David's talked about well. We knew that there's the BTF does not provide a consistent solids loading on the lamellas. There is a flush for about an hour to 2 hours every day, but through the trials we found that the lamellas can actually the nature of those solids that flush down through can actually wash through the lamellas. So we were worried that we would then impact on the disinfection and we wouldn't get the degree of disinfection of the pathogens. The other thing that was done too was in 2016 we had almost no information on what's known as UV transmissivity. That's the degree in which UV can penetrate the effluent. Between 2016 and 2019, the plant did a range of transmissivity results, and they weren't as good as we had assumed. So that meant we had to increase the size of the UV. So the degree of certainty around some of these areas was clarified through those 3 years, to a point where when we entered the preliminary design, we're in a much better position to address them. I think I also want to stress that I believe that Council was reported that the 24.4 did have a degree of uncertainty around it with an upper bound of 30 million. I just want to clarify that with David. I don't think we've talked about that, David, but you know, we did know that there was a degree of uncertainty, as we've talked about, in that initial estimate. It's always the case as you go from preliminary concept to preliminary to detailed that you're actually trying to address uncertainties and reduce that dollar value. We have priced different foundation techniques. It's not in this paper, but if there was a need to, there is recorded and work we've done for Council and reported that if you were to take a lower risk, a higher risk approach, then we did look at those, all the extent to having just raft under the whole lot. But we got the impression from the last meeting that it was necessary that this plant does have a high degree of resilience and recoverability after a quake, and we've taken that into account. And you have seen the cost of the lattice, or the relative cost per square metre. I can assure you that we have looked at the reduced building, if you like, the plant platform, and are confident that the piled foundations are giving you the same degree of resilience as the lattice, because the building shape is different. It's no longer a heavy concrete framed building with a lot of concrete at height. It's a steel frame building with effectively just as a platform. So it's much more flexible, and therefore it can have a different form of foundation. I think I've covered off.
Thank you for that, Gary. I just want to, we're going to stand up for 10 minutes and just stretch our legs. Okay. We've got heaps and heaps of questions coming. I just want to reassure all councillors that you will have the opportunity to ask the questions you want to ask. If you want to ask more than once, we will get there. I'm just working through the list, and we will give this a thorough discussion. So I just want to reassure everyone, if you do want to have another chance later, you definitely will. Drew, just before we break up, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just wanting to try and simplify what Gary's been saying around the lamella. So the lamella is the best fit for Gisborne. Unfortunately, the ground conditions that we've got down at the wastewater treatment plant mean that traditional clarifiers can't be used because they're just not cost effective. So due to the lamella's smaller footprint, it's the best value that we can get down there. With the effluent that comes off the BTF, it's very varied. And how the lamella works is the sediment basically drops out. And unfortunately, there is some sediment that floats, and that's the time taken for that to settle or potentially not settle at all comes over the top of the lamella. So we needed to include the disc filters, which is actually a cloth, which picks up those smaller particles that don't drop out in the lamella. So that's why that's been included. And we sort of can't increase the size of the lamella or anything like that. And we've discovered that as we've done more testing on the effluent of the BTF and progressed the design. So hopefully that sort of clarifies a few things on the lamella and the tertiary filters. So lamella and tertiary filters are still the cheapest and best option available to council.
Thank you for that. So guys, we're going to just take a little break. It's 10 past 10 now. So 10 minutes, we'll all be back 20 past 10 just to grab a coffee and stretch our legs. We'll see you at 10:20. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
How you going there, mate? You're good? Good. Yeah.
I was at home, my Zoom kept on going in and out all the time, and all the other times the Zoom's been okay. It hasn't. I've never had it falter. I just.
Larry, I'm just reminding everyone that everything you say is now being taped. So if you do want to have a personal discussion with Bill over your coffee break, just make sure you guys are comfortable with it being live streamed, or just mute your microphones if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Step outside the room.
Yeah, okay. How do you turn the microphone off? I mean, that was over on Bill's. Is that just that button? Just on that button. Just turn it off.
Just come out and shut the door.
1 minute to go, everyone. Okay, so just for process, we have got a supplementary question from Tony. Then we go to a councillor, so first Councillor Robinson's supplementary question. Then we move to Councillor Dunn, Councillor Cranston, Councillor Worsnop, Councillor Gregory.
It was after Kerry, I lowered my hand.
Okay. Okay, do we have everyone back? Not yet. We'll give them a few more seconds. I'm just letting you know that I'm not actively following the chat room, so I'm not always seeing what goes on there. So if there's something directed at me, I might miss it. Okay, Councillor Robinson, you can ask a supplementary question, and then we move to Councillor Dunn. Thank you.
Thank you. My supplementary question is in relation to the foundation design, and having read the response that Mr. Councillor Dowsing received yesterday, my understanding is that the reduced or condensed footprint means that pipe breaks, and the ability to have more flexibility in the system is gone because of the reduced footprint, but that reduces the lattice footprint. However, has Becca done the pricing on going back to the larger footprint, because we don't have a shortage of land there to work in, which does allow for more movement and break points between the bits of kit, but with a reduced or higher risk design for the foundations. In other words, you've got piles are now acceptable for under the loadout area, which is a steel structure. If we moved everything else out and spaced it more so it could move around in the event of an earthquake, can we get away with a lesser engineered foundation bay? Actually, we really want to see.
Councillor Robinson, the last 10 seconds froze. Can you just repeat your last 10, 15 seconds?
Okay, so I don't know if you heard about how we've been told that piles are fine for the loadout area, which is going to have a steel building structure. But the fact that everything else is closer together means it can't move around in the event of a significant earthquake, and therefore we have to have the lattice. If we spread everything else back out again, because we do have the space there on that site, we could get away with a higher risk, less engineered foundation solution. And what would the price saving be?
Thank you for that. Gary, I'll pass over to you, or is it Mr. Wilson that needs to?
No, I'm fine with that. The nature of the building, the platform on which the presses sit, has changed the way in which we can actually make the whole thing as resilient as if it had been on a lattice. And because it's a relatively small footprint in itself, piling is quite effective. It's the steel frames, the steel will come down onto a concrete foundation, and under that foundation will be supported on piles. It would be much more difficult, and we have done the exercise. We have compared piles underneath the liquid plant, the other tanks, if you like, and it's more expensive than if we do a lattice. The lattice is much more cost effective when you can bring things together and actually have them as in a much more compact form than we have. So it's really horses for courses that the steel frame building is better to sit on piles. We could put it on a lattice; it would be more expensive, but it wouldn't really make a huge degree in difference in terms of its resilience. If we were to space the liquid tanks out, it would just really spread the lattice out. There may be a less degree of price in that, but we don't think it's worth it. It's better to leave the tanks, if you like, the liquid tanks on a lattice foundation, because it can all be done as one single operation in terms of civil engineering, in terms of the engineering.
Thank you for that, Gary. We move to Councillor Dunn.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Gary. I can see that you and your team have worked really hard to get the costs down, while also ensuring compliance with our consent conditions. So thank you for that. I really like the strong focus on meeting the consent conditions. I don't hold the same unease as Councillor Robinson. The costs were always going to go up from an estimate that was made in 2016. So I was always expecting a price increase here. As we think about this, we need to remember that this is critical, essential infrastructure for our city. We must have it. My primary concern that sits in here is with timeframes. I noted, Gary, that you said the build would start in January. But the big problem we have here is we actually don't have the money to do it. And that's made very clear in paragraph 33, that we have to go back to the long-term plan to get more money to complete this project. So the timeframes are definitely of concern for me. And I do acknowledge that David Wilson has made that very clear that timeframes are going to be difficult for us to meet. I do have 3 things that I'd like to ask questions on. The first one was paragraph number 9, where one of the significant increases is with provisional in general, and it says this is a significant increase in scope. Can you identify exactly what that increase in scope is?
I'm just looking for your reference. It's 9 in the report. Is that correct?
Yeah, 18, paragraph 9, yes, and it's the second to last bullet point.
So just while Gary's keeping up with the technical side of that, so P&G's gone up since 2016 for a number of reasons. The biggest one has been health and safety drivers, has increased the cost of P&G across everything that we do. Since 2016, of course, the new WorkSafe requirements have come in, which has driven things up. The other part of the P&G that would have come up there would be the move across from the 2016, we were in the old site, we've come across to the new site, but then also looking at the lamellas plus the separation as it goes through will be the reasons for that, Councillor Dunn. Unless there's anything you want to add, sorry, Gary?
No, I don't think it's really the change in scope has driven up the cost of P&G. It's just in terms of timing as well.
Okay, but just because in that number 9 paragraph, that bullet point, it says the significant increase in scope drove up the cost. Hence my question in the scope change. But thank you.
Can I just jump in here? So if you work through all of the items that are above that, those are sort of scope increases. So the building, the tertiary disc filters, the change in site are 3 quite large items, and that's a scope increase. So initially the concept was right next to the pickup location from the existing plant to the stage 2 was very close together. So we didn't need to do much work to get it from the existing site to the proposed site. Now there's a lot of additional work to get it over to, although it looks close, the actual pickup point is a long way away. So there's a lot of additional piping and stuff there. It was around the building, which is no longer there, and also the tertiary filters.
And Councillor Dunn, I've rereading it. I think it's there's 2 phases here. The P&G's gone up both in dollar value because it's a percentage. So as the scope has increased from above the line, as Drew has said, the percentage that is applied against has gone up. So it's gone up in both dollar value, but it's also gone up in percentage value. I think that's how I read it. There's two components to the change in P&G.
Thank you.
I just realised how we've actually compounded the 2.
Yes.
Thank you.
Second question was, in one of your slides, you talked about the consent variation and it was going to take 4 months. What exactly are we varying? We're actually making an improvement on the discharge. So what specifically are we varying in our consent? why it's going to take 4 months?
So through you, Madam Chair, there's a couple of things that we have to vary to our existing consent, Councillor Dunn. One is around the disinfection being installed and the timeframes that are required, but then also we need to look at the requirements for the operation of this plant and what the discharge will be. So it will be around the discharge quantity limits that we'll be getting them up to the standard that we will be having them to with the new operation of the plant. Also, the loading of it is prescribed, sorry, the wastewater loading of the BTF and all of those things are prescribed under the current consent. Those are the ones that will need varying as we work through this process.
Okay, essentially, in terms of the consent variation, the ultimate outcome of what we are aiming to do is an improvement in the discharge. So it's not like we're going to ask for something worse. We're actually going to tidy up this. When it says the concern I have is it says consent variation, it sounds to the public like we're going to go and vary something specifically because we can't meet it, but in actual fact it's the opposite. We are putting in place the kit we need in order to meet the health requirements for our discharge. So I just that's the only thing that caused me grief there.
Can I just sort of clarify there? So we've got consent conditions which come in at the end of this year. Yes, we're upgrading the plant, but unfortunately we're not going to be able to have that plant built in time to meet those consent conditions by the end of this year. So we're asking for a variation on the consent to extend it as it is now until the plant is built. We're also asking for a variation on, at the moment there's limits on what comes into the plant, but we're asking for those to be removed and the limits only be put on what comes out of the plant. We're saying that, hey, it doesn't matter what comes in, we should be solely required to meet what comes out of the plant. So no matter what comes in, we have something good coming out, and that's what we should be judged on.
And technically it's a variation, but it's not a bad variation, Councillor. I think that's at the core of your, it's the optics of the word really as to what people would read into the word varying. It's not varying it badly or negatively.
Yeah, though that's up to the public to decide, isn't it? Because as I keep saying, my main concern here is the time frame, and actually the consent variation is for an extension in time, and I think we're going to come up against some issues with that particular aspect, and that's not even considering the cost of the plant. So I just want to reiterate that the point is, in the presentation it was said that the build was going to start in January. We still don't have the money to do this until we go through our long-term plan. So I just wanted to make that really clear. We won't be building it in January because we don't have the money to build it unless we somehow bring it forward. That's my primary, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn. I'm going to ask Councillor Cranston, and then we're going to slip in Councillor Seymour after Councillor Cranston before Councillor Worsnop.
Yeah, thanks for that. Also pretty gutted to see these numbers, but I'm kind of gutted to see the uncertainty range too. I want a bit of explanation around what we are approving when it comes to those. Version 2 doesn't in the -15 +25, but I'm kind of assuming that that does sit in there. Our first take we had 24 million, but hey, it could be 30 million. Now we're hearing 33.5 million, but hey, it could be 41.87 million. So that's plus 8.3 million. So can you explain the uncertainty range there and what are our expectations? Do we need to go to the public and say, hey, this is going to cost 41.87 million, because it's very unlikely we'll be in the minus range, quite unlikely we go slip into the plus range.
Drew or me? I think that what we've done is looked at the areas in the estimate where they could either go up or down, and so that's why we've given a range. So some of the areas where we're conscious there could be an increase is the cost of materials. As I said, there could be a bit of a boom post-COVID that could drive the price of materials up. The exchange rate is another one. So we've taken a middle ground, but we know that there are these aspects of price of construction, price of materials, and foreign exchange could increase. And we've effectively allowed a contingency in there to cover those sorts of uncertainties where we are at the moment. We're much more certain about the quantities of the materials, but the price of those still could vary. We have got a frozen cost on the equipment. So the having gone to tender on the kit, on the 4 pieces of equipment, we're much more certain about those. But that too could also be subject to a minor amount of change. So in behind those, the estimates we've given now, each one has been assigned a possibility of either increase or decrease, and so we've now got a sort of a weighted average across the core value of 33.5.
Can I add on that as well, that we are still only at preliminary design. We haven't progressed into detailed design, so we don't know all the details that are involved. Becca still have to go through and do a thorough design on it. We're still talking about a preliminary design. We don't know completely all the minute details that are involved, so it's very difficult to come up with an exact number when we still don't know the full technical aspects of it.
So possibly Nadine or Dave, when we're going out to the public, are we going out with 33.5 million or something under 41.87 million?
Through you, Madam Chair, the numbers that we're giving have always had a variance attached to them. So unfortunately for us with our community, they hear a number and people fixate on that one number and they don't hear that there is still a variance to come through. So the 33.5 is where we're at the moment, and we don't know until we get our final detailed design that we'll be able to give a closer range to then. As we know, it's until the construction contract is issued, we then know based on the contingency that we have in place as we move forward. And that's construction of something of this size and scale. That's par for the course, unfortunately.
Okay, second question, probably Gary. Staged approach. Is there a functional practical staging which could be adopted and gets us in line somehow with consenting requirements, or is it all or nothing?
We've certainly staged the presses. If you were to meet the operational preference for the treatment plant operators, we would probably have 3 presses. We reduced that to 2. That's a relatively minor reduction, so we've certainly allowed space for that. But in terms of meeting the consent, we've looked long and hard at that, councillor, and we don't, because we've got little to very small positive growth in Gisborne, so it's not as though we can sort of put in some kit now and then when the population increases, which gives flows, we put in more. I don't think there's much opportunity for staging if the consent conditions are to be met.
All right, thank you. And last one, possibly to Nadine or Dave, what number did we put up for the CIP application? Yeah.
I just have to refer. It's in the Chief Executive Activity Report. The exact number that we applied for.
Was it based on this information?
In there, yes.
I can tell you that was based on the shortfall between 24 and 42.
No, so yeah, we amended that number. Sorry, I can pull it up for you. So.
Thanks.
Great. Neville West just around the group.
The total amount that we put forward was the 34,700, and they'll want to come back with council contribution.
34 mil, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Andy. I'm going to slip Pat. You are next, and then Councillor Seymour, and then we move to Councillor Worsnop.
Oh, yes. Thanks very much, Madam Chair. And thanks, Gary, and your team, because I know you've been working on this project for years. And just an observation, because I feel really uncomfortable about the cost, that when we built the BTF, we always understood that one day we might need to do UV disinfection. And that's where we were. But I think all these other things which have come in over the last 4 years and prices have gone up are really substantial for our community. So my first question is around the change of site, because that's been given a lot of criticism or inferred criticism at the cost of 1.5 mil. But what plan did GDC have if we hadn't had the opportunity of utilising that land? I mean, something else is built on the site that we had our mind on using, I believe, and it's still, back to Councillor Dowsing's question, I still can't believe a few extra pipes, a number of extra pipes even, can come to the cost of 1.5 mil. So to the Chief Executive or to Mr. Wilson, the issue around the change in site, which has become available over the last 18 months to 2 years, what options did we have before that, and what cost would have roughly been attributed to that?
Through you, Madam Chair, the change in site was through a discussion with us as a project team and with GHL around what would happen if we asked them to vacate the site that we had. So the previous site that we were going to use is where the vehicle testing station is, down at Bank Street, the archives site and the Bridgestone site there as well. Looking at the commercial return that GHL makes from those sites, it made good economic sense for the group to purchase the site next door, for us to move over onto that. So it was a commercial reason for why we moved across, and GHL were the ones who came to us with that as an opportunity, that it made better commercial sense for them given the return that we have on that. When it comes to the costs, there are costs around pumping over to where we are, absolutely, but there were significant costs around relocation, demolishing the buildings that we had over at the other site that we would have needed to do. So it's a better option to be onto the brownfield site that we're moving to, because we're taking it over clear. There's nothing there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. That's exactly my point. So we should, there were going to be costs in whatever we did. So while it is a change of site, I mean, surely it should be site preparation, because it would have been more cost in using those other sites. So we're making out that in using a new site is costing the project 1.5 million, when in fact it's not. It's actually probably saving some money. Anyway, that's that point. I'm still a bit bothered about the lamellas that have this is probably for Gary, that a trial has been done. Do you have confidence that sufficient quantum of fluid has been put over them to be sure they're going to work if they've not been used to date with water from a BTF?
Yes, we do. We've taken the opportunity to not only do the trial in the latter half of last year, but we've actually been in discussions with the supplier or the proposed supplier of the lamellas. They have actually visited the site. They also saw the trial, and they have said that we will give a process guarantee on the output from the lamellas, having given them all the information. So that's what we've been doing a lot of discussion with the lamella supplier, the tertiary filter supplier, and the UV. And this is what I was talking about, the cascading of from one to the other. We have to line them all up to make sure that each of those vendors or each of those equipment suppliers understands what they're getting in at the front end of their plant and what they are being asked to guarantee at the back. So our degree of confidence has increased over the last 6 months in terms of the lamella.
Can I ask then, what is a process guarantee? Because if you're saying that those the providers have said that they can guarantee they're going to work, and the next council is expected to fund something else that needs to be added to the kit because the kit's not coping, what is a process guarantee, please?
Well, it is exactly that. It's we won't be paying them the full amount of their contracted amount until we've actually run a series of tests once everything's assembled. So we have a stage commissioning of the plant, Councillor Seymour, where we'll actually commission the lamellas, put the load on those. Once that's proven, if you like, we will then pass that on to the filters. So it's what I call cascading or back to back. I'd just like to add to a comment that the longer term aim, and I think it's something Councillor Dunn brought up, is the longer term aim is to actually start looking at alternative uses for this effluent. And this project will take a major step forward to producing a very clean and disinfected effluent that is suitable for displacing potable water. And I think that long, and therefore, if you use it on land or and not put it down the outfall, then you are reducing the use of the outfall. And I think that is the long-term aim of everybody, is to reduce that. So council taking this step of having that filtered, disinfected effluent and using it on site to save almost $250,000 of drinking water, I think is a good signal that this is the step step on the journey that we've always been all been on for about 10 years.
Thank you. That's a really great point, and it needs to probably be made more public in the material that we put out. But of course, for those of us that were around when we put in the BTF, that was going to be the greatest saviour, and everything was going to be 99.6% clean and go down the pipe. So some of us have heard all those kind of things, but I totally agree with the point you make about the reuse, and we should be telling that story. One of the other items in, I think it's in 9, is the issue that says that it's only going to be run during normal business hours. So I want to know what cost is that bringing? Is that a consent condition that we can only run the filter, the impact of operating it on restricted normal operating hours is what it says. So I want to know what the impact is on the operating or potentially the size of the holding tanks. And if the operation could be run 24 hours or even 18 hours, is there a more cost-effective design? It's note 7 on page 86.
I'll clarify that, Councillor. That only relates to the solids handling side of the business, because we only want to be able to load the truck out at a certain during the working day. So effectively the plant operates 24/7. The liquid side, we will be actually running the liquid side, the clarifiers, the lamellas, the filters, and the DUV will be running all the time.
Perhaps we should make it more clear in the paper, because it actually does say quite specifically in 7 at bullet point 4, operating hours not exceeding normal working hours.
And that's being in attendance on the site. The site is, as I said, the liquid stream will be running all the time, but the solid side, that's why we've got the sludge holding tanks, the 2 big circular tanks. We're going to hold the sludge from the lamellas and the filters in those tanks, and then they'll be operated for, it was going to be normal operating hours, but we've talked to the operators, and that's why we've been able to reduce the number of presses, because they said we're happy to work for a little bit longer, and it's just the pressing of the dewatering will be run not 24/7, but it'll be run sort of like 12 hours a day. So that's just to clarify.
May I have a supplementary, Madam Chair, to Chief Executive or to Mr. Wilson? Then anybody that puts in a business it's really expensive kit like this, they actually run it to get the greatest potential use out of it. And why aren't we contracting the running of the operation or ensuring that we run it for the most cost-effective amount of time if there's a saving to be made for the ratepayers?
Sorry, I'll just answer there. Sorry, Pat. So it sort of relates to the preliminary design when it came out. The sizing of all the equipment was based on the solid stream was based on operating on the current plant's operating hours. And like you're saying, to get the best return for council, we said, hey, this isn't going to work. We need to increase the operating hours of this so that it's less expensive for council, and that's what we've done. We've got it to the smallest possible 2 presses instead of 3. So we've got 2 presses. You can't go any smaller than that, and we've had to increase operating hours to be able to achieve that. So we have followed exactly what you've mentioned there.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No worries. We move to Councillor Worsnop, then Councillor Gregory, then Councillor Akuhata Brown, then Councillor Wharehinga, and then I will ask if anyone else wants to say anything, and then we'll open the floor to more questions. And Councillor Sheldrake, sorry I missed you out.
Okay, cool. So my questions have a couple of people have already jumped on them. Andy touched on what was probably my main thrust, which was really confidence in the numbers that we provided with, because there was quite clear upper limit of 25%, and we've blown out to something like 37, which is nothing like 25%, based on the progression from concept design to the preliminary design. We're obviously going to now go into the detailed design phase. How much confidence, like Andy was saying, can we have in the assumed potential variation there, or are we going to see another blowout again? And I take a little bit of issue with what Dave said in that the public fixate on the number that we give them, because they fixate on that because that is what we budget on, and that's what we rate for. So we don't rate for a variation of this or this. We put a number in, and that's what we collect rates for. So they've got a good reason, I suppose, to have an expectation based on the numbers that we accept. And when they don't come in anywhere close to what we do expect, it's our job to say, why in the hell not? So when we move to this next phase, I mean, we just spent an entire meeting, really many meetings, agonising over how not to put further costs on our ratepayers, and the numbers in here completely blow all that out of the water. So it's really around confidence. How do we have confidence in the next step being what we hear that it will be, and how do we give our public confidence that we are doing everything we can to keep these numbers tight, and that we're not going to see another something come in from left field that swamps us again. So yeah, that's something that what do we really have to be confident in this? The site change was also a question that I had that Pat has raised, and those questions have been answered for me. The last question I had was just at the end of paragraph 9, just when you come over the page into page 88, it talks about the alternative use and disposal, the beginnings of it for us, and a saving of 20,000 per month, with the system pays for itself within 2 years of operation. I'm assuming that's not the whole system. So what part of the system is that referring to? Because at $20,000 per month, it's not really possible to pay for $35 million of something in 2 years. So could that be clarified for me, please?
Thank you, Councillor Worsnop. Who is going to answer the questions?
Can I answer the last one first? The recycling of the effluent with a storage tank and pressure pumps and so forth was not necessarily wasn't included in the concept design. So that system is the one we're referring to, Councillor. That the system of recycling the water, the extra cost of that has a payback period of between 1 and 2 years. So it's only that part of the system. But it was considered by the project team that it was worth including. Otherwise, we'd be using, so this is where the OPEX came into the equation. If we weren't using that, we wouldn't put the kit, that particular system in, but you'd be continuing to buy water from council water supply to use around the plant, which is of that order of $20,000 a month. So what we're doing is putting capital cost in to save $20,000 worth of operating costs.
So that capital cost is in these numbers?
It is, and it's in the estimate now, yes. Yes, right. It's in the estimate. But sorry, it's a bit, we're not trying to pay for the whole system in 2 years. It was effectively just that recycled water system. But we think the optics of using it and also the cost effectiveness is worth including it in the project.
I completely agree. But was that assumption in the original concept design? No.
No.
But so that's an addition under what? Is it under scope? Is it under...
Oh, did we?
Filters? What?
Just looking to see if we explicitly said that the two things that weren't in the original concept that are now in there, are now in the design, are the recycled water, which I don't think explicitly is mentioned.
No.
But also the septage area, so that's independently funded. But we want to do it as part of the contract works, but it's not a part of the capital budget we presented to you. So this is where the septic trucks come in, and it's a much improved facility. It will be a much improved facility over what we have now, or what's there now. But that's independent of the budget that you've got in front of you at the moment. Right. It'll come out. I think provision was made for it as part of the Tracy's plant budget. But the other concept about degrees of accuracy as we progress, I'm not sure what the practice of council is to when you put things in the annual plan as to whether you put the upper limit or whether you actually put the median number, if you like, and then a range around it. That's more for Neville and Chief Executive Nadine to answer probably.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here through your worship. So just in terms of the confidence that we've got, and I think we need to be careful about using these words like blowout of our budget and stuff, especially when we were talking about in 2016 a concept design, and that prior to 2016 council hadn't actually budgeted anything for which they were required to do under their resource consent to further improve the quality of the water and look at removing that pipe from the bay. So at that point, I think the team have done incredibly well to reduce what could have been quite a significant budget, looking at the number of the options that the Wastewater Technical Advisory Group came up with and then recommended it back to council. And so where we're sitting at now in terms of the 33.5 value engineered version 2, I would say that that would be the number we would be putting into our long-term plan. But we need to be clear that there is still in your preliminary design stage, there are still risks that may, and unforeseeable, unfortunate events that may mean that that budget might be plus 15 to 20% over at end, and it's something that we would need to manage really, really tightly as we go forward. This is not like a roading construction project where you know exactly how much it's going to cost, where there's a high degree of certainty, low degree of risk. This one has a lot of kind of technical elements that the team need to work through in order to provide and to keep constrained within that budget. So I would say that the degree of confidence at this stage in terms of that $33.5 million is the best that the team have come to in terms of working through on paper and through trialling and peer review where they can get to, recognising again that once you're in there are still potentially unforeseeable risks.
I guess my point is just we councillors perceived to do this a lot. We say this is what it's going to cost, and then we go back and say, oh no, it's going to cost more. Oh no, it's going to cost more. And it doesn't feel good to people. It feels as though we never say, right, hang on, we're going to be accountable for saying that it was this much. Obviously, everyone understands that prices change and things like that, but I would really like to hope that we're not going to do this again in 12 months to go out and say, actually, we need to rate for more because this is going to cost more, because it's a repeat of something that's not very palatable. And are we better to budget high? And I think it might have been quite conservatively budgeted originally for it to have gone up so much, and that's what's making this look particularly so different now. I'm not sure what your opinion is on that, but I think if something's going to cost a lot, you're better to prepare people right from the outset than to keep going back and saying, oh, actually a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. But yeah, just purely in terms of being accountable to our ratepayers. Cheers.
Yeah. So through your worship, if I just can comment in terms of so how the LTP has traditionally rolled out and the changes that we've tried to put in place to address exactly what Councillor Worsnop has been signalling, because it has been you're right in terms of the history of that happening with councils, and the tricky thing is that the LTP requires you to put in like the best amount or closest amount that you can get to at that particular time, and Pauline will be one that will attest to this in terms of us plugging in some numbers, and which we have done in the past. If some of you will recall with the Olympic Pool Complex, when it was originally mooted, it was going to be a multi-purpose, might have been about $28 million back then, Pauline, then it dropped again down to $10 million, and these were all based on concepts. And I think the issue is that trying to communicate that to our public around that project and construction build life cycle is concept cost is very different to what you may end up with a detailed design cost, and very different if you're going to build it 3 or 4 or 5 years later, depending on where the cost of construction is at. And so what we've tried to do is take a staged approach where we're building in your preliminary concept design stuff in that first 3 years of the LTP. So when it comes time to revisit that LTP, we're plugging in the cost that we're going to be closer, where we've got a bit more certainty, like this one, for example. So in this LTP, we wouldn't be having that $24 million because that was initially the concept, but we'll be going forward when you're actually hitting the rating per pocket, you will have a better sense of what it's going to cost. And I think it's engagement or a kind of educative process around the budgeting and project life cycle and the difference between what's put in at concept and where you land in terms of a detailed design.
Thank you for that. I'm going to give Bill and Larry the opportunity because they do not have a little blue hand to put up, so I've been blatantly ignoring them. So I'm just going to give Larry and Bill the opportunity to talk to us, and then we move on to Councillor Gregory, then Councillor Akuhata-Brown, Councillor Wharehinga, Sheldrake, and then we go to everyone again.
Yeah, well, I'm quite happy to talk if it's okay. Look, I want to congratulate staff on presenting this report, and I understand how hard it is to try and meet the budgetary constraints, and I believe that they're doing the best that they possibly can, and I know for the future that all future planning will have that budgetary constraint in mind as well. And so I'm actually happy to move this paper as it is, to get this ball rolling, because I'm hearing a lot of stuff that is really historic, and well, being on the wastewater treatment committee, I guess we do hear a lot more update information than the councillors that aren't on it. So, you know, I'm quite comfortable where we're at the moment and the process that we've gone through. So I'm happy to move this paper as it is to get the ball rolling.
Thank you. Councillor Burdett, do you have a comment to make?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. I've listened carefully to the questions and some of the answers. I think David and Neville, David's assistants, and Becca have done an incredibly good job thus far getting us to where we are. We all know we live in the real world, and an escalation of costs is something that we have to accept. Sure, they need to be questioned, but where we are at present, I mean, I have only got one question for Gary, and that is, in terms of the final design, what will that cost us? How much of an increase?
Don't know, Bill.
What? Look, you've got to go there, because then you've got to go to tender, and you don't know what the outcome, despite the fact you've got the figures, you don't know what the final tender price will be.
Thank you for that, Councillor Burdett.
I was just going to comment on the fact that when we get to detailed design, we're more in the realms of plus or minus 10%, because we'll have frozen a lot of the details and a lot of the risks will have been established. And it may or may not be, when you go to tender, you're never quite sure what the construction market is doing at that particular time. So that's probably the biggest point of uncertainty. We can start freezing the design details and quantities and getting a full measure and putting costs associated with those. So we will get down to that plus or minus, I would say, somewhere between 10 and 12%. But you're then at the hands of the contracting market, really, as to what they, the appetite they have for this sort of work, how keen local subcontractors are, etc.
Thank you for that, Gary. Oh, there's a supplementary question. Thank you, Councillor.
The only reason I pressed for a response was, if you have a look on the page 86 in the preliminary design, minus 15% or plus 25. So thank you for the answer.
Thank you for that, Councillor Burdett. We now move to Councillor Gregory and then Councillor Akuhata-Brown.
Thank you. First of all, on a positive note, the recycled water part of this is fantastic and really exciting about to think forward about what the options are for us to use that going forwards. I was also alarmed at the cost, I won't call it a blowout, say increase. but I understand it is critical infrastructure for our city, and so we just have to move forward at this point. And so a lot of my questions have already been answered, that particularly that last one about when the costs are going to be frozen, and that's with the detailed design, I understand, which is that around about October. And my second question was, is there any potential there to add any kit that would be required for population growth, or adding places like Wainui into the system?
Good questions, thank you. Who will be answering that? Mr. Wilson?
So through you, Madam Chair, reticulation of Wainui would be able to be encompassed with the plant that we're talking about as we are now. So there would be no hold up with the size plant that we're doing now. In saying that, the caveat I will put in is that is completely reliant on us removing more rainwater from our system going forward at the same time. So those have to go in parallel.
Yep, that's going to make that point.
Thank you for that.
So is it October that detailed design is going to be ready, and then we'll have a sort of a final cost with a 10 to 12% range?
At the detailed design, the next stage after, or as part of detailed design, we'll be preparing issued for tender documentation, and that's the point where we give it to our cost estimators, and they will do what's known as a pre-tender estimate.
Yeah.
And our recommendation, that'll be sort of in October. We're hoping to be early to mid-October. We want council to understand what that is, because once you go to tender, you're sort of committing yourself to the contracting market. I mean, you don't have to accept all the tenders if they come in, but it's generally accepted that you should really confirm, yes, we're happy with the pre-tender estimate before you go to the market. So we haven't sort of scheduled a meeting in October, but it's something for us to work out with Drew and Neville and David as to when that meeting should be. Presumably we won't be having virtual meetings at that stage. We'll be able to sort of be in a room together.
Yes. I'm okay. Next, I move to Councillor Akuhata Brown, and then Councillor Wharehinga, and then Councillor Sheldrake, and then Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou. Listen, firstly, I just want to say thank you to all my colleagues and those in the space who've asked all those technical questions around all of the build infrastructure, etc. Because in my basic framework of a non-civic engineer, there was a lot of good answers to things I, certainly don't have a good handle on, but have been informed today. My statement today is in the significance part of the report, assessment of significance, because I want to highlight point 26. This project is undertaken to deliver on wastewater quality improvements required as part of Council's resource consent that has significant interest for tangata whenua and the community. I want to quote sent to me recently was that we really have got to the point where most of our community, if not all, and in particular groups like those tangata whenua, etc., simply want to see no more tūtai in Te Bay and rivers. That's their framework around the wastewater treatment space. It's a very basic ask because it's based on well-being. It's based on clean. It's based on systemic, I guess, moving into a future of wellness, sustainability, etc. So I'm heartened that the notion of significance has that mentioned. But I want to ask today, my question, I have a few. When we are talking about the costs associated to a concept and preliminary design, these are typical of council infrastructure, aren't they? Even though when we see a big rise in costs, we all go, our constituents are going to be asking, what were you not ready for? So are these extraordinary costs that have come through in this speak today just simply part of a process of a structure like this? And so we can send that comms message out and very, very clear about preliminary concept design so that the next column in the paper understands why we use the lamella and other technology as we were learning. Because I've been on council a number of years now, and I've heard this project be talked about so much, but you get to a point where you're excited for the next phase to see aspirations of the community met. So in the significant space, I want to ask, what other projects from our CE can we put aside and simply focus on ensuring this project is a priority? Because more people use it than a majority of other projects we put money into. In fact, on the daily, I think lots of people use it. Yes, of course, they've got some issues. Anywho, so I'm just really clear that this is a priority structure. It's got significant interest. We learned that costs have accrued and grown substantially. So where does it sit in a priority space to take out other things that just can't happen till we get our toilets and our wastewater working at its optimum? And then, as Councillor Gregory noted, we're going to be looking at long-term adage of other communities who want to be reticulated. What does that come at a cost of? So first question, simply, how do we, if we just put it out to the people that the costs are based on typical project, like I've seen with every other project in our region, and also, the certainty of having no more effluent in our bay and rivers for tangata whenua and other community people. How clear can we send that message? Because I love the positivity of the potable water speak, Gary, you mentioned. So yeah, that's just my kind of rant. Kōrero to this framework, because I want to see this project happen, because it's an absolute necessity infrastructure for a council. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Akuata Brown. Will our CEO respond?
Yes, through your worship. So just in terms of priorities for council, this is the project that you are required to deliver under your resource consent. So it is number one priority from a regulatory environment as well. And you may recall in terms of the early engagement that we undertook for the 2018 What's the Future long-term plan, that was one of the number one priorities community was coming back with, was around our environment and cleaning up our waste from the bay. So it's something that the community not only wants, but you're required by law to sort out, really, as per your resource consent. And what happened in that 2016 decision-making time was that you were presented with all the different variations or types of different options, different costs, and this was the one that was most optimal, and then got refined over 2018 in that decision there. So just in response to that question there, Meredith, Councillor Akuata Brown, it is the priority for council. It's been reflected not only from your LTP but also from the regulatory environment. And then the other part of that was around engagement and awareness, and that was certainly something again that was coming through from tūranga iwi and the wider Māori community in terms of that environmental stewardship side. And our tūranga iwi have been engaged all along the way and have supporting this particular project as well, as I understand.
Just supplementary, and thank you for that, Nadine, because I feel that that's a message we really need to be leading on in respect to our role as council. So thank you. And also, in light of recent discussions around iwi involvement, I'm grateful we're seeing more of them at the preamble speaks of involvement rather than at the after. So yeah, and I see this as a priority 1 and 2. But in saying that, I think personally, the costings are always going to be an issue for this region and shouldn't be the focus as much as they always have to be, because we've got to be prudent. I would like us to send a strong message of that priority as we see our city come out into level 2, into the spaces from here on. So thank you, Nadine and the team. Thank you for answering all my questions. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Akuata Brown. Next, Councillor Wharehinga, Councillor Sheldrake, Councillor Faulkner.
Kia ora tātou. Hey, first off, I want to start off by seconding Councillor Foster's movement of this paper. I I'm happy to second this paper. I do want to start off by saying that we met in February in regards to the foundational work and the wastewater project and things like that, and we tasked our council staff with value engineering the discussion that we had in Feb. And this recommendation that's coming back is a result of our conversation at that time. Yep, we did say that we wanted lattice kind of everywhere, but it's come back as a hybrid system, which is what it's nice to see that it's come back in that way, because that's what Councillor Dowsing was kind of pushing for at that time. But if I can kind of talk about the conversation we had there, if I'm recalling correctly, that conversation that we were having was about future resilience of the wastewater treatment plant. It wasn't so nailed down on this is the thing that we definitely need to have. We'd kind of landed on lattice framework because we were saying we want this to be long lasting. We want it to stand up to tsunami, to earthquake, etc., etc. And I'm happy to go with this hybrid model of foundation, even though it goes slightly against what we had discussed in February, because for me, the intention of that conversation was about longevity of the wastewater treatment plant. And this paper demonstrates to me that there will be longevity with the foundational hybrid model that they've come forward with. To me, also, we asked, we also asked council to value, to come back with figures and really, really work on reducing how much it was going to cost our ratepayers. And I am happy to see that it has actually come in with a saving of $2.3 million by reworking what we had tasked, or by reworking what was originally presented to us into this current model. I'm not talking about what was the decision that was made in 2016. I'll talk about that shortly. So I'm happy to see that there's a $2.3 million saving in regards to that, and I think we haven't really focused on that difference between the two value engineered costs that have been coming through to us. Yeah, this is a far cry from our 2016 number, but like with everything, that's why pies don't no longer cost 50 cents. They cost, $4 now. Everything increases with time, and it's like Councillor Dunn, time frame is a big issue for me, but it's the time frame for us as councillors to get things done. If we could spend so many more years talking about this and kind of really working these things, and I actually do think that we're a great, considered, intelligent, hard-working group that really do work these issues and work these problems really, really hard. I also want us to also be a group that does the things. So that's why I'm seconding this paper, because I do not, whether I'm on council or not, I would cringe if the 2024 councils was talking about this decision we had made in 2020 and kind of going, man, it was 30 then and it's 60 now. Why didn't they action it back then? Kind of thing. So yeah, I'm happy to stick in this paper. I really do want to implore us to speed, we have to get this done for cost reasons, for our consent reasons. If there's a number one reason to get this done, it's actually for our consent reasons and meeting our consent and our obligation to our community.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wharehinga. I am going to move to Councillor Sheldrake now.
Thank you. Great debate, great to listen to, and about 4 of my questions have been answered along the way. But just one back on the plant. By reducing the UV in the press from 3 down to 2, will this limit the potential growth capacity of the plant?
No, it doesn't. We've actually allowed space for another UV module, if you like. So we've allowed, even though we've reduced it from 2 channels to 1, we've actually got some upside that we can build in. So a little bit of capacity, but it won't reduce the capacity of the plant in the long term.
Great, thank you. And is there provision, you know, for a pipe that could ultimately run out through the flats to Muliwai or whatever for alternate uses?
I think that looking at the chat, and Drew has mentioned it, we've got a blank flange, if you like. We've got a T-joint on the final effluent which can be tapped into. It's right by the road, so if there was a use, we don't know where the use is going to be, so we've just made provision for it in the pipework underneath the ground.
Right. Ultimately, how clean is this water? You know, we talk about drinking water. How clean, how close to drinking water will we have?
It might be slightly murky. It might have a bit of tinge to it. It won't be the same as I've just been drinking, you know, from the Waikato, from the tap. But it's remarkably clean. When you look at it in isolation from a glass of potable of drinking water, you think it looks very clean. But when you put the two side by side, you will probably see a bit of a difference.
But it'd be okay, like for dry stock or.
Well, we think it'll be okay for. I'm not sure about for animal drinking water, but certainly for irrigation of crops and things like that, no problem at all. It's still got the nutrients in it, so it's still actually a good. So it's still got nitrogen, phosphorus. It's still got some of those good compounds in it, as do the solids. In fact, the sludge that we're producing is of great benefit too, and that's probably the next challenge for council as to what to do with the solids, the cake. But the water itself is suitable. I mean, we wouldn't be recommending it be used around the site unless we're confident that it was okay, because
cool. Just finally, I lost a bit of the conversation around the money time. So, you know, once the design was given the ultimate green light, a detailed price will come forward around October. Is that what was said?
Yeah, that's where we're pushing for. Yeah. We definitely want to be tendering the job in October. So we're pushing the team. We have lost a little bit. We've been sort of marking time in a way until today. Right. We have made progress where we can, councillor, but we've got you know, we've worked through COVID okay. So we're almost the middle of May, June, July, August, September. 4 months. We hope in October to be presenting back to council. This is the detailed design, and here is the pre-tender estimate. We want to get the tenders in and evaluated and awarded before Christmas, if possible. That's my aim.
Brilliant. And Gary, this is all in New Zealand dollars, no doubt.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So now we have Councillor Faulkner, and then we're going to open the floor if there are any other questions. I see Councillor Dowsing and Cranston already have their hands up. So if you have supplementary questions, please start putting your hand up now. The blue hand, I mean.
Thank you, Your Worship. Like Councillor Sheldrake, most of my questions have been answered, and but I would like to certainly reiterate Councillor Wharehanger and the need for action now. It strikes me there's been an awful lot of hooey and not a huge amount of doughy to date. So I think there's a time where unfortunately we just have to make the call because this is what our community wants from us, and it is for all those reasons. So that would be my first statement. My thought, and it's only because it came through on the chat, and I'm not sure if it's actually I don't want to add to today's time frame, but it is about what we can actually, the opportunities quite literally out the other end of this plant. And you all know that I'm all about water and production and all those sort of good things. So it shouldn't be anything new that I'd love to see the feasibilities for irrigation, for industrial washdown throughout the area down there, and how we can really make this plant part of the circular nature of what we do here in the region. So
instead of, certainly firing it straight out into the bay, one could argue is part of the environmental cycle, I suppose, but I'd love to see it come back around and actually be used again if it is as clarified as people are, as intended. Because in all reality, it then puts it into the conversation around the MAR project, the aquifer recharge. It puts it into the whole conversation around growing our productive capacity on the flats. I'd just love to see that there's that some opportunities, the feasibility studies of the opportunities of this plant to come out the other side, because that way, yes, the costs are always going to keep going up. We all know that. You can't sell that to ratepayers. It just is what it is. But if you can prove that there's some thought gone into what comes out the other end, then I suspect we might have some slightly different conversations. That's all. Thanks to everybody for your time this morning with the explanations too.
Thank you for that, Councillor Faulkner. So what I'm going to do now is, if there are any other questions, I do have a mover and a seconder, but I do want to give everyone the opportunity. This is such an important paper that I don't want anyone feel rushed. I just ask that whatever your question you ask, make it clear so that the people who you are asking explanations of know what you are asking, and also just stick to what this paper is about. Thank you. We go to Councillor Dowsing, then Councillor Cranston, and then Councillor Akuhata-Brown.
I've got a question too, please.
And then Councillor Foster.
Thank you. I'll be clear that I'm going to support the paper because it's absolutely necessary for our region to progress this project. But my issue is with the paper itself. It doesn't give us clarity as to why there is an increase in cost, and there's far too much contradiction in the information we've received today as to why the costs have increased. Also, I take exception to the comment that it wasn't a budget blowout as well. Our original budget of 24.4 million with our contingency had an upper limit of 30.5. Now we're at 33.5, which in my opinion is, and that's 33.5 as an average, not an upper. That's a $3 million blowout. If we go to the upper end of that with the 25% additional, that's 41.8 million. So we're potentially at a 71% increase from our initial budget. What I really don't want to see in the future is us having preliminary designs that have to state a contingency of plus 71% increase minus 10. And in my history, in the time I've been on council, I haven't seen us not use our contingency budget. So let's not be unaware of the possibility that we will consume that and be up in that upper level of 41.8. Added to that, there was a comment of the risk of contractor coming into this when it does go to tender, which could be another 10 to 12%. That puts us at somewhere around the $45, $46 million mark if we have that increase of risk. Now that represents an 88% increase over our initial budget. It's not fair to our community to be progressing plans that have that level of uncertainty, that have that level of potential increase. When we put this back into perspective of our history of this project, back in 2007 to 2009 somewhere, we had a price to deliver this project at $40 million, including another BTF onto at the primary site. We're going to exceed that budget now with a 12 or 13 year delay on the project. And in that time, we've spent well over $1 million in researching what we're going to do to try to reduce that cost. So it's a pretty hard lesson to learn, looking at it retrospectively, seeing that we have not saved any money, that we have not been able to progress it in a timely manner, and that now we are most certainly going to blow what was our preliminary budget. So yeah, I don't think there's any way to hide that fact or to look at it any differently than the fact is that we are going to spend a lot more than what we thought. That's all.
Thank you for that observation. Anyone wants to respond to that or no? Okay, we go on to Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thanks for that. My question relates to the recommendation. Unfortunately, I can only go back to my docs on tap on my phone. I've been trying to see if there is something in there that I've missed. It's about recommendation 2, which is authorising equipment procurement. I don't know if there's a number associated with that equipment procurement and whether we've got the PUTIA in place to do that. So do we know what the number we're authorising for that purchase is?
I think the total was in the presentation, Councillor, and I'm pretty sure it's 5.2 million is the total sum.
5.2, thank you.
I think that's true. That's right, isn't it? But the immediate need will be to pay what I said is the deposit, which could be somewhere between 5 and 10% of that, just to get access to the drawing. So there's like a down payment on this equipment, so that the manufacturers will then put it into their their supply chain.
Yep.
So, Your Worship, it's on page 19 of the report. The table outlines it.
Thank you. And once we've done that, that's us on the road.
Yep.
For that.
Yes, correct.
Yep.
So the reason that we've asked for that is because we didn't want to proceed with purchasing that early equipment without having a sign off on the additional budget. If we had just gone and purchased the equipment, then it would have put council down the road to progressing the design. We thought it best to come back to you guys, check that you wanted to still progress the design before we purchase the equipment.
Okay, Councillor Cranston, you finished? Yep. I move to Councillor Akuhata-Brown, then Councillor Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Shannon. I think in line with a lot of what you've asked today, my kind of final kind of space of this is the historical, I guess, and whole project scope of this particular infrastructure, having heard lots of it from way back in the 2000s. Is that the learning is that do we bite the bullet in certain decades and just pay out? I was always wondering that and when I was first elected to council, because in my lifetime, I've heard many times over tangata whenua, mana whenua, and those who have invested kaitiaki roles within region constantly ask council for this job, for this particular infrastructure to finally meet environmental consent concerns, etc. So I was always really hopeful that in the time I was on council, that the concerns and all the issues raised by local iwi and that were going to be met with a final project happening in my lifetime. So for me, the learning in this space is that certain infrastructure needs to be prioritised more succinctly, because I think about other projects that we've put funding into that not all the district will use. And I think of that as a theatre, say. So I know that we try and balance our needs, our wants, our hopes. But for me, this project is absolutely about saying no longer will tangata whenua have to keep asking for tūtai to be put, to no longer be a part of our bay and rivers. So that's my strongest view today, is that we are going to do something of significance for all people, and particularly our future generations of young people. So I'm good with that. So yeah, kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. So I've been having a little chat with Gary, just questioning. I missed him when he talked about the flange and the ability to tap in for the amount of water to be used for, say, irrigation. He confirmed to me in the chat room, no, that sounds a bit dodgy. He's confirmed to me that the flange would allow for the full amount of water that goes to the outfall to be diverted elsewhere, which is fantastic news. So I then asked him, surely a pump would be required because of the pressure that's coming off to get it moving, and he agreed. My next question was, well, should we be planning the foundations for that pump now? And that's outside the scope of work that they're currently briefed on. But I simply flag it because I think we're all in agreement that the potential to utilise this treated water for irrigation is a massive, it's part of our kaupapa that's definitely on everyone's minds. And if we're going to build something now, and then we say, oh, crikey, Dick, we should have thought about the pump that's going to be needed to move that off-site, and we just didn't extend the foundations a little bit further, or we just didn't put it in the right place. I mean, we need to have that thought now. So I want to flag that, and I would ask that point be considered moving forward from here, because just our bloody luck to go down this path and then we find the pumps in the wrong place or something. That was my thought. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can just jump in there. For AUD, we have put the ability in the system to be able to pump off to another site and location as part of our design and drawings. As part of the land negotiations with JHL about how much space we would take, we've put in more than enough space. So we've put in a space for the pump station to go, should we do that. A lot of the size of that pump station will depend on how far we're going. The current scope that we have from you is to design and build our secondary treatment plant at Bank Street. We have no funding, we have no mandate to be looking to anything for AUD until a suitable option has been found, and you've given us a test which we have to go away and look at those options around the AUD. But we have made provision for AUD as part of this build that we're doing now.
So does that include foundation work or just simply area size?
Through It's for space. We're not doing foundation size. A pump station has a very different foundation than what we're doing now.
Okay, councillors, any more questions? Please physically put your hand up so I can see if there's anyone else that want to ask a question. Larry.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so Gary, there's a question for you. You said that the water that would come out of that pipe at the end would be suitable for irrigation. We've always led to believe that that water has to go through a wetland before it would be suitable for irrigation. So are you saying now that a wetland would not be needed? The water that's coming out of there would be suitable for irrigation of most of our crops that we have on the land without the wetland concept, because the wetland was actually going to add another cost, a huge cost to
Point of order, Madam Chair. Is this in scope of the paper we have in front of us and the decision that we are making? I think that we've gone off scope.
What?
You're muted. You're muted.
I'm muted so that, yep. So fair point, Councillor Dunn. We do need to make sure, like I said earlier, questions should relate to the decision we are making today. So if you can please stick to questions that relate to that paper, that would be good. We are not discussing supplementary stuff to this today. So if you please physically put up your hand, otherwise I'm going to put the recommendation. Councillor Akuhata-Brown.
My apologies, Madam Mayor. I meant to ask this question when I was having my little wrap up. I just wanted to know whether the group involved with the mortuary waste, tangata whenua wise, were involved in this project in the sense of mātauranga Māori frameworks around effluent waste, etc. I was just interested to know whether they were part of the project group.
Councillor Dunn, can you comment on that?
Sorry, what was the question?
Just if for mortuary waste, the group that was involved with the mortuary waste work, were they also involved to tick off Mātauranga Māori for this paper?
Well, I think Dave or Nadine.
Through you, Madam Chair, can I answer that question?
Yep.
So we've been working with the Kiwa group for the last almost 3 years. They've given input into the design, as the design has also been discussed at the Wastewater Management Committee. So we've definitely had input the whole way through from a Mātauranga Māori point of view. One of the big outcomes from that input through the whole process has been the mortuary waste, and that has been where the focus is around how that is to be done. So the Kiwa group has had significant input into what we're doing now.
Okay. So I'm going to put the recommendation that we have on page 84. I've got a mover in Councillor Foster and a seconder in Councillor Wharehinga. We've got two recommendations in front of us. One, instructs staff to proceed with detailed design of the option Valued Engineering Design V2 and acknowledges that additional funds will need to be approved within the 2021-2031 long-term plan process. Two, instruct staff to continue with the early procurement of equipment. All in favour, physical hands up, please. Oh, good. It looks to me like everyone's hands are up. Against? Yes, that was unanimous. Passed. Thank you.
Wow.
Okay, councillors, thank you so much, Gary. Thank you so much for the support, you and Drew and Neville. Thank you so much for the amount of work that has gone into this. Thank you, councillors, for the in-depth questions and queries. Thank you to staff, Nadine and Dave, for this process. It's such important infrastructure for our community, and as a council, we do want to get it right. So thank you. I acknowledge your work in this. And we look forward to working with you on this project going forward. Councillors, we are going to keep on moving because we've got quite a bit of work to do going forward. I'm just going to see if we finish this agenda and then have a quick break before we move into our PE agenda. So we are going to start on page. Thank you, Gary and Drew. We're going to say goodbye to you now. Thanks a lot for joining us. We're going to go to page 93.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move that document. I'm happy to move the paper. It makes imminent good sense, and the recommendation is there, so I'm happy to move.
A second.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour and Wharehinga. Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Cranston, and yes. Use blue hands if you can, please. Blue hands if you can.
My Zoom is frozen, but I remember my question. It was, what provision have we made for a cycleway access across the piece of Māori land, given that we're not going to acquire it? What right of conveyance over that land is being secured?
Thank you for that. Mr. Roofrock, thank you for joining us today. Will you answer that question? Can you hear me, Josh? Josh, can you hear me? No, you are still muted. You're still muted.
Still muted, Josh.
Let's see if I can unmute you.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can, while Josh is having issues there, we're able to access over the Māori land that we have there. Just want to say, however, there is no provision for a cycleway within our resource consent that we currently have, so we are not building a resource consent as part of this. The discussion around the cycleway came in the original consent application where we did put in for a cycleway. However, that was rejected by the Commissioner, so we don't have a cycleway as part of our consent that we currently have. Josh, is there anything you want to add?
Yes, I missed the start of that, sorry. I was just having technical issues, but could you repeat the question? That's it.
Oh, it was all good. I'd like to support Mr. Wilson's answer. It's a whole new process if we're to put the cycleway on.
Pat, you've just in the middle of your kōrero muted yourself.
No, I was just saying it's a whole new process if we are going to build a cycleway on the stop bank because we don't have the consent, as Mr. Wilson has just said.
And that's fine, but there was quite a strong focus in this report around the cycleway, in particular reference to the second piece of land and the people not liking the cycleway and privacy and da-da-da-da-da. So mixed messages, people.
I didn't write the report, Mr. Robinson.
Not at you, Pat.
Excuse me, people. We have got blue hands up. So we have got Andy Cranston going next. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just one of the parcels of land had a valuation of $1,250. I wasn't sure whether there's an O or a K missing on that because it was, I don't know how significant that parcel is. But as far as a general, in general though, I support the recommendation. It does seem sensible to wait for parcel 2 to see, because it's at that other end that we do need it in the end or not. I am a little bit concerned though, because during Bowler I spent a lot of time digging mud out of houses at Ormond, so I would want to have the knowledge that Ormond was still going to be protected without, I'm not sure exactly where this parcel of land was. And the other concern I had was 33, where they're dealing with the issue of how some landowners might misuse the stop banks and that and do things that were unlawful. And the comment that says in 33 was council is not resourced for sufficient enforcement of the Act. So, you know, if I can't believe that something as important to the protection of our region, we would have a statement that we can't enforce the Act on that. So that was quite a disturbing sentence to me.
If I can respond to the chair.
Yes, please.
So for the first point, with regard to the 1,200 valuation, yes, that is correct. It is a very small parcel of land that we were seeking to acquire, which just covered the stop bank footprint over the former treeland, settlement land in that location. So that is correct. The property owners or the trustees of that land are supportive of the Wi-Fi stop bank improvement works and also the cycle trail following the alignment in that location.
Joss, I can barely hear what you're saying. I'm not sure if councillors have the same issue.
Yes, we can't
Okay,
hear.
let's try again, Joss.
Not too sure if I can turn it up. I've got rain on the roof, which is probably not helping. So that 1,200 valuation is correct. With regard to the legislative powers or controls that council has to resource up to undertake some of that legislative requirements, that's just the nature of where we are resourced at the moment. Yes, the nature of how many issues come up from time to time is low. Generally, the approach with education, advocacy, and having honest discussion with those landowners is the approach to take, and that resolves the vast majority of any issues that we do have.
I can't hear you, Josh. Maybe Mr. Wilson, can you maybe comment, because it's really difficult to hear Mr. Roofrock.
Sure, no problem. So just to quickly recap what Joss has just said, the $1,250 is the amount that is correct. There's no zeros missing. It's a very small parcel of land. When it comes to around the Act and recognising how we enforce what's happening along it, what we're talking about there is where somebody decides to put a pipe through the stop bank when they shouldn't, or someone's grazing where they shouldn't be, or has moved a hot fence somewhere that they shouldn't. A lot of that means that we have to be, particularly during wintering off of stock or in cropping season, is making sure that we've got someone out there often to check. And sometimes, as we've found through the construction, there are a range of weird and wonderful things that are on or in or under the stop bank as we've gone through. So it's recognising that we need to step up that as part of what we've got around with the new parts of the stop bank coming forward, and particularly in areas where increasing water supply has become an issue. We've found a number of new weird and wonderful ways to get water that we have to follow up. Regards to your last point, Councillor Cranston, Ormond is absolutely going to be protected. It's just the way that we're going to do that is via the agreement rather than purchasing it. So the flood control bank is still the same level that we were talking about doing prior to not purchasing this piece of land.
So could I assume that the statement of not being resourced for sufficient enforcement, if there was an issue that was reasonably major, we would find the resource to do something in that circumstance?
Yeah,
the minor
absolutely.
ones I can understand, but yeah.
That's when it would be passed over to the enforcement team. So we have our flood control team who undertake regular monitoring of the stop banks, as they do for all of our flood control schemes across the district. If they found something, it would then be passed over to the compliance team, who would then take it from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Dunn's hand up and then Councillor Dowsing.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm following on similar to Councillor Robinson. I'm wanting just some certainty that even though we don't purchase these 2 parcels of land, it does not preclude us in the future from having a cycleway on the top.
Through your worship. So, I mean, I think that would be a negotiation that we would enter into with the landowners on that, and will be part of that resource consent process.
So what you're saying is they, without purchasing these 2 parcels of land, we have 2 potential obstacles for a cycleway going on top. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that it's a negotiation that needs to be undertaken with the trust that owns the land. It could be an opportunity rather than seen as an obstacle.
Okay, because Dove actually said that they support a cycleway on the top, haven't they? They're not actually against it because that was in the paper. I'm just trying to gauge.
That's correct.
Yeah, I'm just trying to gauge the level that not purchasing this land may hold up the potential cycleway on the top.
As far as the cycle trail rollout plan, which is still in development, I would envisage, as my opinion, it would roll out from the river mouth and work its way northward, following the upgrade of the stop banks. So that's the logical rollout I would take. The parcel by the river mouth with the trustees, they are supportive of the cycle trail and connecting communities throughout the area along both sides of the stop bank. So I don't foresee an issue with that part of the cycle trail. However, for the parcel near Ormond, the property owners have indicated they've got concerns around security and privacy associated with cycle trail running alongside their home following the stop bank. So that's the concern, and that's why they're not willing sellers in the negotiation process. But they are in the northern end of the stop bank and close to the Ormond Township. So that would be at the end, or in many years' time, when a cycle trail rollout would be in that area, and at that time would have information available around actual security or perception of real issues that may or may not have occurred in those areas, and that would assist in any negotiation or discussion approach with those property owners. And you never know, the property owners may have changed hands in that time, and there'd be a varying, I guess, incentive to having a cycle trails in that location. So there's potential for that still to occur down the track.
So can you just explain to me how, if we don't own this land, but we have a stop bank on it that is ours, do we not control what happens on that stop bank?
We do, but that would be a change in the use of that land. So the purpose of purchasing that land is for flood control purposes. We can't then go and change the purpose of why we purchased that land to use it for some other use. So a resource consent application will be required, and the property owners will be engaged through the resource consent application process and have an opportunity to submit and put their views or speak in support of their submission at that time. So they do have an opportunity to either agree or not with the rollout of a cycle trail in that location. So that will be the process to take.
Thank you.
Thank you. We move to Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions, but first of all, I just wanted some clarity from whoever on the purpose of our strategy around purchasing all of the land on that stop bank. Why will not owning this one piece of land cause any problem to our strategy of purchasing all that land?
So
Sorry, Joss, I'll jump in. Through you, Madam Chair, we came for purchasing on the city side, given the significance of that and the different multiple blocks that we were going through, and given that that side's protecting the city, and we at the time were and we'd sought a council decision to purchase that land if we needed it. We've got these 2 blocks here that we're saying we don't think we should buy for the 2 reasons that are articulated in the paper there. It doesn't affect the flood control scheme going forward. It doesn't affect our ability to manage it or to build the flood control scheme. It just changes the fact that we haven't purchased these 2 blocks.
Thank you. Okay, so from that strategy, we can assume that the logic is still sound, that we want to purchase that land to protect our community, and that second piece of land is protecting Ormond area because it's obviously where it's located. So the fact that there is no resource consent in this application for a cycleway means the purpose of challenging this purchase is pretty much off the table anyway. We are purchasing it for a stop bank for protection of the area, not for cycleway. Joss, do you mind muting, please? So the purpose still stands. The reason to debate this purchase isn't reasonable here or now. They should, if they wish to contest, then they can contest our resource consent for a cycleway when that occurs. And with the prior knowledge, we may be able to design around it or design out their problems. But that's a job for when the cycleway occurs, not when the stop bank is occurring. So yeah, my preference is the first parcel of land. I have no concern with. It's perfectly reasonable that that there's no desire to purchase that land based on it being recently returned in a treaty settlement. The second piece of land, withholding it simply because of the cycleway aspect, goes against our strategy of protection of our areas. And so I would be firm on wanting to purchase that land, wanting to make sure we can provide the right protection that we designed into our scheme. And otherwise we may have made agreements with all of the other owners instead of purchasing the 1.648 million worth of land that we've already purchased. It just makes no sense to break our strategy for one piece.
Okay, any other questions, councillors? Physically put your hand up.
Can I just answer there, Madam Chair, around if we are going to do anything with the parcel of land at Ormond, the only process that we have available to us is to take that under the Public Works Act. So the process for us would be compulsory acquisition under the Public Works Act, which does have a number of implications for us. It also has some number of hidden costs for us to do that as well. So it is something that we've tried to keep away from as a project and as a council around compulsory acquiring of land because of the history that it has had. So if you are wanting us to carry on down that line, just to be clear, it's a public works purchase that we would be needing to do.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour.
I was going to have my right of reply if you're ready for that.
No one else wants to say anything? I don't see any hands up. Right of reply, Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just support the recommendation as it stands. And again, Mr. Wilson has just given an explanation of exactly why that is, and formally earlier explained that it was really important that we owned the stop banks on the inside of the river that protected the city. So I think that we should just move to support the recommendation as it appears in the documents. We've had plenty of explanation. Thank you.
So I have got a mover and a seconder for this paper. Councillor Seymour and Councillor Wharehinga, and the recommendation on page 93 states that Council agrees to not proceed with a compulsory acquisition of the remaining privately owned Waipower stop bank land located along the eastern, in brackets, city side of the Waipower River. All in favour, hands up, please. Against? Carried, thank you. Okay, we are going to move to our Chief Executive report on council activities. Do people want to have a quick 5-minute break and then we come back? We're not really going to break for lunch today. I assume people will just eat on the go. So let's take a quick 5 minutes and then we come back 7 minutes, 5 minutes past 12.
Oh, I go for a stretch.
Turn the speaker off for a second, yeah.
Aye.
Turn the speaker off for a second,
Yeah. Well, it won't go off. You are. Oh.
Okay, 1 minute to go, everyone. It's quite chilly in my office.
Your brother-in-law qualified for a repatriation flight, from South Africa?
No, I'll
No.
talk to you a lot about this later. You know that Immigration New Zealand has stopped the processing of all visas in the meantime, and his visa was maybe 3 weeks in the process, so they're still waiting for that to be finished. And at this stage, they're not processing any visas for people that are not currently in New Zealand. They're first dealing with a group of people that are already here that needs variation. So I think there's quite a wait still. Okay.
I'll move the report, Madam Chair. It's very detailed and there's been a lot of good work put into this.
Thank you, Councillor Badet, seconded by Councillor Sheldrake. Any questions? I see a little blue hand up. Councillor Meredith Akuhata Brown.
Thank you. And thank you, Nadine, for a thorough report. I just wanted to highlight within your report on the page that's got strengthening our impact through partnerships. Page 4 of your report. I just noted in there, it's in respect to the amount of kōrero that did happen through media around the checkpoints, because I see there, again, I appreciate that council could only do what it could do, legislative and following rules, but we know that within our region, a significant amount of work was done by iwi, tangata whenua, those who were highly concerned for their vulnerable communities. And I just wanted to ask, how that worked out in the end, but also can your report be given to the press? I feel that in light of a lot of attention to certain operatives of council, they've missed some, I guess, vital, if not helpful information that they could put out to the public domain as to what was going on for council, because I feel your report covers quite significantly a number of things that perhaps they could pick up on in stories highlighting all the extensive work that was done during lockdown. But I just wanted to highlight that in respect to those who supported checkpoints, etc., because it became quite a fair attention, but I saw that, the value, and I wanted to just ask you, are these partnerships ongoing? Will there be a continued effort so we don't just see in a crisis we all gather, but we actually do it on a continuum? And if any new partnerships formed have added value to ongoing work streams for council, etc. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Akuhata Brown. So just in terms of the partnerships going forward, yes, so not only through this crisis that the partnerships were strengthened, but structurally we're required to convene a coordinating executive group which has our representatives from various emergency services and our iwi partners in there as well. Going forward also with our recovery plan, we've spread ourselves, our net further to include a range of other organisations and central government representatives too. And then the second part was around the press, and they receive a copy of our agenda, so it is available for them if they so wish to use.
Sorry, just a supplementary. Is there any more need to discuss checkpoint stuff? Because in this level 2, look, people are still concerned about the movement through levels. Is that just cleared up now as to the government's called it, we moved into level 2. So therefore that element of concern doesn't have to continue or be prepared for. That's all done. Is that
I think, the element of concern is not going to go away, but the ability to practically enforce checkpoints now, given the ability for people to move around their regions or even inter-region, and flights have resumed, so you would struggle to justify the need to continue to do that under current under current rules. But in saying that, in terms of the emergency coordination response, we will be providing back a report to the council around our efforts there, and also feeding back the evaluation information that we undertook, so we can outline all the highlights and some lessons learned and improvement areas.
Thank you for that. We move to Councillor Faulkner, then Councillor Worsnop, and then Councillor Seymour.
Me after that.
And us too as well.
Yep. I'm still blatantly ignoring you, Larry and Bill. I do apologise. Councillor Worsnop. She might be quickly away. Councillor Faulkner.
Sorry, I'm back.
Hang on, are you talking to me or are you talking to Councillor Faulkner?
Well, I thought you were at the top. Did I?
Oh,
Councillor Faulkner, did you put your hand up, Councillor Faulkner?
Yes.
Okay, you go, thank you.
Cool. Great report, and thank you for that, Nadine. Just one question. You talk about in the section around climate change that the regional greenhouse gas emission profiles have been completed. Just wondering when we're going to see those.
Can I defer that to Keita, please?
Through the Chair, we are planning on getting that on the June Sustainable Tairawhiti agenda, but I understand with the contractor there was a delay on one piece of information, so it may be the subsequent to that. We will try our best to get it to the 11th.
You finished, Councillor Faulkner? Yep, Councillor Worsnop, and then Councillor Seymour, and then Badit and Foster.
Thank you, Your Worship. So my question was just around on page 106, the 3 waters service delivery and funding arrangements reform. Just wondering really if you, Nadine, have some kind of an idea of what that might offer us in terms of opportunities, given that we've just spent quite a long time talking about how our wastewater is so critical, and obviously its capacity is going to be constrained somewhat if we're not able to deal with our stormwater issues in terms of expanding its use. What's going on in that space in terms of time? Is there a time frame? Is there it seems like a huge opportunity. I'd like a bit more information.
Yeah, so through your worship, so things kind of slowed down over the COVID-19 period, but I think it also gave an opportunity for central government to start clarifying expectations, and I think might have been one of the mayor regional meets that we were on, your worship, where they were discussing that's more about the large aggregated kind of water supply, and the thinking about that is it's going to be quite substantial water providers that will be delivering that. Our Hawke's Bay cousins kind of got together and put a proposal to the minister for looking at how they can amalgamate their 3 waters into one, and we were looking at, I've been kind of keeping close contact around whether we would benefit from looking at what they were doing there. The view was that they would do it first rather than have it done to them, and so I'm not sure where they are progressing on that. As I say, things kind of got put on hold, but I'm sure now that we've coming into alert 2, this will be put back on the agenda and accelerated quite promptly, especially linking through to the massive infrastructure investment fund that's available.
Okay, all right. So in the first instance, they're sort of more focused on the supply of town supply water rather than things like stormwater. That's what I get from what you just said.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Seymour, and then Councillor Burdett and Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to first refer to the camping review, which is on page 107. And it says it's an issues and options paper to the Chief Executive. Is there an ability in that paper for the issue of driving on our beaches to be raised? Because I've had it raised with me. There's real concern about vehicle access at Inara, where there are threatened species of birds nesting at Puawa and Makarori. And I just think if we're doing an issues and options paper, is that an opportunity to maybe change the policy of allowing free driving along our beaches, which the public do seek? I mean, there's one section that want to still drive on the beach, and there are some freedom campers who use their four-wheel motorbike to carefully take their gear down onto the beach, but there are others that hoon along beaches on them. So what ability is there in that process, Nadine, please?
So that really was focusing on how, the provision of our freedom camping spaces, which we know is a national issue too that needs to be addressed. That kind of, that to me speaks of bylaw approaches, which we would then need to work out enforcement measures around that. If there, and I do know that Doc's raised that with us in the past in terms of how we can better limit vehicle access. If we can just take that offline and maybe come back with a way,
Thank you.
The practicalities of it or what we need to do there.
Thank you. I will do that. Madam Chair, on page 112, I just want to ask about the capital expenditure, which at the minute to the 31 March is 33 million, but our budget for the year is 60 million to the end of June. What is our expectation of that spend being completed by 30 June, and how much impact is there going to be against that?
Pauline? Yeah.
Hi,
Pauline.
Your Worship. So we're just doing at the next finance and performance meeting, we'll give you a little bit more update of what the forecasts are. The forecast is for year end around about 49 million, I think it is. But the report will have it in there and where the projects that have been delayed and what will require to be completed in the beginning of the next financial year. So all of that is there, but that's a kind of the high level impacts at the moment.
Supplementary then to that, so that's 11 million potentially underspent. So will there be, and I hear what you're saying, some of that will be advanced to the early stages of the 21-22 financial, 2021 financial year, but will that mean that we need to relook at our capital spend for the budget for 2021? Because we're just kidding ourselves if we think we're going to do that 11 million and whatever the sum of money is that's in the budget at the moment, and I don't have that in front of me.
The information and those kind of the ability to do those sort of things will also be assessed of what it will be. There is bear in mind there is an also level that we've got within next year's annual plan, some other external funds, so they will be looked in conjunction with what it is. But the majority of things that are asking for carryovers are delay of a bit of a quarter. So those are seemingly being able to ready to go, contracted. It's just those delay of the 2 or 3 months.
Sure, but that potentially pushes out the 2021 year. I'm just wondering, are we going to look at the 2021 capital spend as well?
There is a report with the finance coming up for the 27th, so some of those summaries can be in there as well.
Thank you. And then on page, thanks very much. And back to the Chief Executive, my question is on page 114 with around the community facilities, and I've had a query from someone out of council who's on that committee, and can we have an update on and a real presentation, not just the notes that we've been provided with here, as to the status of the work of that group, because it is external to council, but it does also cover some of our community facilities that are part of council. And I had a call in the weekend asking me what we knew about it, which isn't a lot. So can we please have a full report to maybe our next operations committee, or if that agenda is done, to council?
Yep, through your worship, yes, certainly we can do that. You do provide funding to support that facilities strategy, so we can definitely loop back in and give you an update.
Thank
of where
you.
we're at.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Thank you,
Thank you
Councillor
for the report to the Chief Executive. Thank you.
Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thank you. Page 110, meeting with Ronga Whakaata, which is scheduled for later in May because it was postponed. I just wondered, I know it's about the joint action plan, but really want to know if we can get onto the agenda the discussions around the cycleway out to the river mouth, which is being held up at the moment because that project had got to pretty much virtually construction start day. And if we, and that is the hold up, and if it is held up another week or two, by that time, it'll pretty much get it back to, okay, we've got to start this again. All the tendering's going to be out of whack and everything's out of whack. So there's huge financial inefficiencies that are being created by the delays. So is it possible to get the discussion and get some agreement on that, do you think, with Ronga Whakaata at the meeting? And will it go ahead in May, do you think?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can respond to that. So the cycleway is going to start, I think it's next week, around extending this piece from the Olympic pools to where the Motor Caravan Association have their park there. The following part from Korpututia through the dunes there out to the river mouth is something that sits, there's some further negotiation needed there between the landowners as to how that's potentially going to go going forward. So we've stepped back from that part while they have those discussions themselves internally, and then we'll come back to us on what that looks like going forward once they've reached agreement on the issues that they need to there.
But my understanding was the landowners were Korpututia Trust and they were in agreement, and the delay was Ronga Whakaata, who aren't the landowners.
Through your worship, they.
Nadine, you're cutting out again.
They have an interest in there as an interested iwi. So while there is a landowner interest, there is that iwi interest, which is why they're in.
Sorry, Nadine, we lost you on that. Yeah.
Okay, Nadine, yep, you're now online.
Yeah, no, we can see when we drop out. It's just the microphone goes in and out. The other thing I just wanted to say is that we have been in contact and we are just waiting for a date that suits the trust to reconvene.
Thank you for that. Councillor Akuhata Brown.
Just with regard to general management, page 111, Nadine, I was just asking, wanting to ask, are we confident that all staff, in respect to the movement and levels, are comfortable, confident? You know, I'm thinking about those vulnerable staff members that have had their flu jabs, etc. But in light of moving through mental wellness, etc., are we comfortable? We've got that in check. It's my own personal little thing around people. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Kia ora, and through your worship, so while, as we did with the 7,000 contacts for Operation Manaki, we had our own little operation going internally, ringing our 300 odd staff to check in to see how they were doing and if they had any concerns as they were coming into the workplace or how we could support them. So we've got a pretty good sense check on where our staff are at and who needs some support and how we can do that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Worsnop.
What about us? Oi.
Oh, I forgot about my two favourites, Councillor Burdett and Councillor Foster. Please take the stage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine is one of clarification from the CEO in terms of page 118, and I understand that this work may well have been done or is still in progress. The first activity is the East Coast Fund Administrator for the Waipu phase, erosion control, and the second one is the Hill Country Erosion Debris Dam Study, both funded by MPI. And I understand Kerry Hudson had oversight to, in the first instance, all the pole planting on the Waipu River, and the second one to all the debris dam building right throughout the top end of the coast. But that seems an extraordinary amount of money up the top there, 2,100 should I say. Can you enlighten me as to where it was all spent? If you know.
So through your worship, and I might get Andrew to jump in here if he has more around the detail. But that was awarded in 2016, and so
Yes.
that covered a couple of staff members to administer that. They were MPI funded, based in our office to do that, and that would also have come with some funding that could be invested into some projects.
Thank you.
My turn.
Through your worship, I think that probably covers that first. Through your worship, I think that probably covers that first part of the question. That is a long-standing program, and it has been an effective program in terms of our erodible land up the coast, and Kerry Hudson has played a major role in coordinating that and continues to do so. The other point was in terms of the debris dam review. That is a separate piece of work which is looking at best practice. So debris dams have been considered to be best practice over many years now, but it's always valuable and supported by MPI to continue to review practices so that we're doing the best thing for our erodible land.
Thank you, Mr. White. Any more questions from Bill or Larry?
Yeah, I haven't made one yet. Yeah, my question is regarding the transfer station, and the transfer station was closed over level 4. It reopened over level 3, and I've had a lot of complaints about the fact that in level 3, it was supposed to be cashless, but it was also only pay wave FPOS only. So people couldn't even use FPOS cards unless it was pay wave. Which was, and so many people were turned away that they couldn't put their rubbish in because not that many people have PayWave. But my question is now with level 2, is it going to accept cash and normal FPOS cards for people to take their rubbish? That's my first question.
Mr. White.
Through your worship, councillors will be aware that council does not operate or own the transfer station in Inner Street. That is fully a waste management operation. So council's function in terms of waste management is waste collection and waste minimisation. That said, we will follow up with waste management around level 2 operations, but like our own facilities, libraries and other facilities where we deal with monetary transactions, we will not be accepting cash, and I don't think we would be encouraging waste management to do that either at this point.
Yeah, no, it's not really so much the cash, it's just the fact of having a pay wave only, when pay wave isn't that popular at the moment, you know. So I just know so many people that went a long way to the rubbish, you know, from a long way out, kilometres away, to go and dump their rubbish there, and got turned away because they didn't have pay wave, which I thought was pretty bit unfair. Anyway, my other question is regarding the camping review, and are we going to look at putting a remit in nationally to the Freedom Camping bylaw or the National Freedom Camping concept? Are we going to put a remit in from our own council? Are we going to sit around and debate about what we're going to put into that remit?
Yes, Larry, we will have a workshop for us closer to the time. Like last time, I've asked everyone, get your ideas sorted if there is a remit, and we will organise a time where we will sit down and decide if we are going to put our energy into submitting a remit once we see what councillors have. So once we have that meeting, I think it's only due end of July now, because our AGM is only the 20th of November at this stage. So we still have quite a bit of time up our sleeve. So yes, I can assure you as a council, we will talk about that.
Okay, now, because I have been an advocate of freedom camping, but and I also promoted Kaiti Beach, and I've seen what's happened around there, so I'm actually really wanting to change.
Cool. Yes, we will definitely have that discussion going forward around remits. Councillor Worsnop.
Sorry, it takes me ages to find the unmute button. All right, so my question was just around page 118 when we're looking at the general funding update. I was just wondering if it was possible to get maybe a bit further breakdown, because we sort of have heard the news around Titirangi, and there's obviously been a change in status of some of these projects that I sort of feel like they need to drop into maybe 3 categories: the ones that are finished, the ones that are still going, and the ones that are no longer on, they're no longer funded, because it's from, I don't know, just in terms of knowing what is still chugging along and what we're still putting energy into. It's not very clear just from this. And I guess the point that I was probably the most sort of surprised about really is if you take out roading, the in progress or completed only comes to about 20 million. And if you look at our decisions pending, it's 248 million. So we've been really, really grateful for all that we've been given so far, but actually what we've been given, if you take out roading, they've been relatively small sums in the grand scheme of things. The big stuff that we really need help with is still sitting there. I think we need to be quite mindful of that when we're lobbying, I suppose, back to central government to say, look, yes, you've given us some money, but actually, other than roads, you haven't really given us that much. There's a lot of potential there, I think, for us to say, look at this other stuff that we really desperately need. So yeah, that was my comment.
Thank you.
And best, I suppose, on that first bit. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I see Councillor Faulkner's hand up.
Okay, hi. It was just another question following on from Councillor Worsnop just now, and it's actually around Palmore and the fact that we've applied for funding. I'm just wondering, given how much logging has actually gone on up there and trees have already been removed, what's been done about weed control that tends to just spring up as a result of that tree cover going, because the chances are, who knows if and when this $18 million of 1 billion trees money may or may not show up. You could end up with a really significant mess up there of weed species without it being controlled in some way. So it was really just a query around what's happening within those those logged over areas that we're looking to return to native.
Through your worship, that's a really good question that we intend to answer along with other points comprehensively at the next operations committee. So you'll recall that I promised a report on the implementation of the Palmore project or program. I think it was Councillor Seymour requested it, and we'll be coming back with that. But your point's really well made, Councillor Faulkner, that there are areas that have been cut over. There is more that is being cut over, although less than what we originally anticipated because of the slowdown over the last few months in the forestry industry. But we have, we're letting a contract for pest control, because that is one of the other factors that affects not just the Palmore land, but also the other forest and restoration work that's been going on around that area, and also a planting program for this coming winter that also includes the weed control, pre-planting work and post-planting work as well. So we do have a clear plan in place, and we're well advanced in the procurement of those 2 services around pest control and planting / weed control.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Anyone else want to ask something before we move to second and third questions?
Madam
No?
Chair, can I just ask when that report will be available? The report Mr. Andrew
Right.
White just mentioned that we've requested.
The report that I offered is 28th of May, Operations Committee.
Thank you.
Oh no, sorry, it's actually before that. It'll be 27th of May, Finance and Performance Committee, because there are questions in there for council or recommendations around confirming funding for this year and next year.
Will the Pamoa subcommittee meet? I'm not sure if they've met before. I've just skimmed some info on the side. Have they met and have been part of this process?
Not at this point. So you'll recall in the terms of reference for the subcommittee that we intend to have iwi contribution or iwi involvement in that subcommittee, and we're working through how that might work with the various iwi involved in Pamoa and Wainaki. So we're not quite there yet, but this is basically operations at the moment in terms of the handback of land from JNL, from the forestry right, the planting that council has already committed to through its resolutions and the program around that. So it is really important that we do get that subcommittee up and running, or whatever governance process we want to engage in around that. But at the moment, we've still got to progress with the operational work.
Thank you for that, Mr. White. Okay, Councillor Akuata-Brown, quick question.
And my question is possibly to Mr. Wilson, and it's just in line with data gathering around road use or closure of roads. I note Tau Whareparo Road closure again, etc. Is that data used to give a strong, I guess, strength to our rail? I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this to you. So I just wanting to know, with all the data that we collect around road using, now that the roads are open more for our port, etc. Because I see in the recent newspaper there's a poll, and rail is again being requested for community, etc., etc. But do we use the data around road closures and damage to roads, etc., to strengthen an argument for rail, etc.?
Through your worship, we use the road closure status for around resilience of our road network package, so it was part of the thing that informed our PGF application. We aren't doing any work in regard to rail as part of that, but all of our information around road closures, stoppages, delays are all publicly available.
Okay, so for this paper, thank you to our CEO for a thorough report of what is happening. And thank you for all your questions of clarification. I have a mover and a seconder. I've got Councillor Burdett who moved the paper and Councillor Sheldrake who seconded that. All in favour, hands up please. Contrary? Moved, thank you. Okay, this brings us to the end of our public agenda. I'm just going to move on straight. We're just going to carry on like we usually do. I will stop. Let me just see what notices come through here that I can just make sure.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Just before you speak, let me just tell you what the process is. What we're going to do now is going to move into public excluded like we usually do. We do our public excluded business. If we decide during public excluded, if there is something that we want to move into the public, it happens after the meeting. So at this stage, what we're going to do is move into public excluded, do our public excluded business, and if any, we then make that decision afterwards. So I move that we move into public excluded now. Do I have a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Akuata-Brown. All in favour?
Aye.
Contrary,
No,
carried.
other business will come after public excluded, will it?
What business?
Other business.
Well, we'll just
Mhm.
have our, is there something you want to discuss?
Well, there's a couple of things that came through you. You had a letter from Andy Leslie regarding sports facilities, and I can quickly resolve that. I don't know if you were wanting to get an answer
from who?
From Andy Leslie about the sports, trying to get some support to the sports organisations around town.
Point of order, it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, but as other
we can discuss that.
Other business, I'm saying, when's that going to happen? It's not on the agenda, but it's other business because it came out to us by email that there seemed to be a desire for some sort of discussion around it.
So I
And
do have a few
quickly
things
give
that I
you.
would,
Andy's right. We should, but we need to remember we actually are on a council meeting. So Andy's question's valid. If there are other items they need to be moved, that they get discussed before we go into committee. And was sent to us saying we were going to discuss it, whether that meant it was an agenda item for the meeting or.
And I did ask whether it was going to be discussed. Yeah.
Let me just quickly get my mind. I'm confused now, Andy. Just tell me, what are you referring to? I've got 700 things going in my head at once.
I had a letter from Andy Leslie, and he was concerned about the sports club in our region not having the ability to stay robust, if you like, and whether the council would support any initiatives to help them out. But I can offer you that the Sports New Zealand have got a fund which has been put out to Gisborne, and it will be, the conduit will be Sport Gisborne, and that's 211,000, and each sport club can apply to that fund to get resilience based around rates, insurance, rents, and all that sort of thing. So I don't think at this stage council does need to do anything, but we do need to get it out to the public and the sports organisations, which Sport Gisborne is doing, that fund does exist and it is open now, and they will want to get that out the door reasonably quickly. So anything that relates to rates, rents, insurances, accounting, annual accounts, and that they can apply to this fund to get that support.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot. And I'm sure Sport Gisborne Tairāwhiti will also be putting out some media around that to invite clubs to apply if appropriate.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the reminder as well. Is there anything else that councillors that I said we were going to discuss and it might have slipped my mind? Councillor Akuhata-Brown and then Councillor Robinson.
My bad. Sorry, I will remove my hand.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, I'll remove your hand. Don't worry. It's easier if I remove it because then I am in charge of my own facilities. Councillor Robinson, your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I know you set out the process before we move into the public excluded set. I want us to have a debate, please, before we do that, around the ground set out for excluding the public in relation to the whānau kai appeals part of the paper. In my legal opinion, it doesn't meet any of the exclusion criteria, and it's a really amazing paper which is really detailed and I think would be very beneficial for the community to see.
Point of order, Councillor Robinson. I've pointed out to you how our process works, and that is how we deal with it. If something that we then discussed in public excluded is decided by council, we will then move to have it moved into the public. So that is just the process we follow, and you will have the ability to raise those issues very soon. Anything else that councillors want to raise?
Sorry, Madam Chair, the resolution to exclude the public is a resolution that we should debate before we make that decision.
Well, I've already moved to move into public excluded, and there's a seconder and it's been passed. So once I put it to the floor, we will be in public excluded, and you will then have that opportunity to raise the issues with us. Anything else, councillors? If not, we've got a mover and a seconder for public excluded. All in favour? Contrary. Okay. I'm just going to deal quickly just take 1 minute while I stop the live recording. Heather, did you say to me, I just stop the recording, or do I just So I just click stop. So we will stop recording as of now.
Stop the live stream.
Okay, live on YouTube. Stop